Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So to see you all. Hello, Lily. Good to see you. Good to see you. We're here with some stormy weather because it literally just started hailing. So, got like a mini hailstorm going on outside. So, Jesus, what weather! But it's good timing because we can be here, cozy inside. Just looking at beautiful work in progress. Hello, Jonas. Hello, Mike. Hello, Beauty. Hello, Azur Sekirio. Good to see you. Love to have you here. Lily is saying, oh boy, it's still sunny here. Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts. I don't know which way the wind is going, but it might be coming your way. But yeah, hopefully everyone is doing well. Love to see you all here. Hello, Jack. Good to see you. Hope everyone is sort of still catching up or like recovering from all the freaking game live streams that have happened in like the last week. Has been fucking mental. Oh my god. It feels like there's so many this year. Like, I don't know where they all spawned from. Like, there's so many of them now. Not that I'm complaining. I mean, there's also so many games. So, yeah. I have good news. I have recovered from my whiplash that I had with Guild Wars 3. I'm kind of settling into, you know, the initial reaction to more like acceptance now. So yeah, that has been happening. Also for people that are in the US and are looking for a position, they literally have an open position to work on their team, which as an environment artist. So hey, if you wanna, if you work in the US, that could be cool. I think it might even be full remote. So even if you're not outside of the US, I would just throw in like an application anyway, because it doesn't specifically mention US only. So who knows? Just throwing that in the chat. Hello, Nautila. Good to see you. State of Unreal soon. Oh, is that soon as well? I keep missing that because, yeah, I don't know. It still feels weird to me that there is like a State of Unreal. I know that they're like a big company, but it's still in my head. It's just like a game engine, you know. And I know that it's like the engine behind like all the games, but there's still, I don't know. There's something that my brain can't compute with that. State of Unreal. When is that happening? In Orlando. When was it though? When? Oh, the last one was in June. Let's see. Oh, the next one is scheduled for June 17th. Okay, interesting. Interesting. 3 p.m. BST. That could be fun to have like a get together with the community. Just watch it live. That would be fun. Maybe I'll organize something like that. That would be nice. Lily's asking in the chat, I saw a post about the Game Artist Meetup on LinkedIn. Will there be more information posted later? Yes, there will be. We are still, not still, like we, as some people that haven't seen, we are actually coming back with the Game Artist Meetup, which is like a meetup that we did for the first time in Cologne last year, which was amazing. We had a lot of fun. Oh my god, we were excited to bring it back. So the good news is, it is being brought back. We are trying to be more public about it now. So we just made a post about looking for people that potentially want to sponsor us, as in if you want to connect with like a small game artist meetup that is like quickly growing and you want to be a part of that. We're really curious if you want to reach out to us. So yeah, we have all the people, the people that co-organize this have made a post, and then we're gonna see what comes out of that. We're excited though. We're excited. We already have like a good relationship with the event that we're doing it at. So I think it's highly likely, unless something really badly goes wrong, that it's gonna be at the same place. Which is already good. It is even going to be in like a bigger room because we're trying to be more ambitious about it too. And I think we might even scale it up, like, still reasonably, right? I don't want to scare people away. We still want to go for that cozy, like, get-together vibe, but there will definitely be more people than there were last year. So, and also a good thing, I've not negotiated this with the co-host, but that was a thing last year where all the sponsors, if they want to, they do get a ticket, right? Or they can reserve some tickets or something like that. And because BE is sponsoring, thank you all so much for making it happen and helping us organize a part of that event. There's also going to be some tickets reserved for us as well. So yeah, closer to the event, I'll make a post about it in BE and all that kind of stuff, so that if you're coming, we'll keep you in the loop and we'll get you in, because I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, if you see some posts floating about for the Game Artist Meetup, feel free to share them, comment, get us that reach. That is really appreciated. But yeah, just because you're curious, Lily, it is highly likely that it will be on the 26th of August, which is like the weekend, not the weekend, the Wednesday of Gamescom, at the same location as last year. But yeah, we will make some confirmations for that, like, hopefully pretty soon. Sounds good. Thank you for asking, Lily. Appreciate it. And also thank you for sending me like a couple of other events as well. I saw your message. I've yet to reply, but thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. Let's see. For people that are new to the stream, first of all, welcome. I'm Timothy Dries. I'm a senior environment artist. I've worked in the games industry for like over 10 years now. If you want to ask any questions about game development, environment art, being an employee at like a bigger game studio, whatever you want to ask away. That's why these streams exist. It is for me to help you get into the industry as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out. MH is coming in and saying, I wonder if they will use AI for character face matching from photos now that Real Illusion CC5 has had this feature, which, by the way, it's terrible from my experience. Yeah, you're asking for a feature that has been terrible in like another program. I mean, that sounds like a good sales pitch, you know? I have honestly no clue about anything character related. It's a good question. I've got no clue. The only thing that well, it's not a secret, right? Like in a long podcast with Tim Sweeney, he mentioned that the overlap between Unreal Engine for Fortnite and Unreal Engine, the game engine, is gonna shrink, right? So they wanna more merge the two. What that means, or if that is still the plan, who knows? Because from the looks of it, Fortnite, sure, it's doing okay, but it's not doing as great as it's supposed to be doing. So I'm curious if that is gonna change the long-term plans for Unreal Engine and Fortnite and all that kind of stuff, you know? So be curious to see what is gonna happen with that. But yeah, honestly, anything else, I don't really have a clue about. Because here's also the weird thing, right? I have not made games professionally in Unreal Engine. I've always worked within in-house engines, which means that from a professional development standpoint, I don't really have an idea how it is to work with Unreal. Because I've done all my work in like in-house engines that are just not available to the public most of the time, right? So yeah, who knows? Who knows what we'll be doing in the future? But yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see what they're gonna be talking about though, because even if it's just for the spectacle, they usually put on like a good show. They have some like really interesting technical demos that they're showcasing, and yeah, I don't know. They know how to put on the show. So if it's just for that, I'm gonna be happy. Hello, MSR. Good to see you. Good to see you indeed. How are you doing? But yeah, I think that would be fun to kind of have like a social gathering with the community, kind of watch the thing together, get some live reactions. Yeah, I'll probably set something up for that. That sounds pretty interesting. I do want to do more of that stuff. I was talking to some people in the community about it yesterday, that I kind of want to do some like co-working sessions during the day for people that are just like, I don't know, working on freelance projects or whatever. Since I do have more time available now, I think it would be nice to just carve out a couple of hours a week where we can just, um, I don't know, sit together, work together, and just have a casual hangout. I think that would be nice. Is there a big difference between Unreal and Studio's engines? Yeah. Yes. In general terms, Unreal has to do a lot more effort into making their product work really, really well for a vast majority of use cases, right? That means that in a lot of cases, and this is not to say that like in-house engines don't have like good UX or like good design principles behind them, but when you compare Unreal Engine to like any in-house engine, they put a lot more effort into the user experience, right? Like how easy it is to get to a certain thing or to use a certain workflow or something like that. Unreal puts a lot of attention and focus on that, where that is probably going to be less in, because that is going to be less so in like an in-house engine, because the focus is on like shipping a game, right? Because if you think about it, Unreal Engine developers, they're focusing on making the best engine that they can. Whether in a game company, you're focusing on using the engine as a tool to make the best possible version of the game that you're making. So those are like two completely different things, right? One group of people is focused on making the best game. One group of people is focusing on making the best engine. So there's going to be some significant differences there, for sure. But I will also say that, I mean, even to this day, like those more niche use cases, right? Or those use cases where, let's say you're working on like big open world games, right? If you work at like a company like Ubisoft, for example, you have a bunch of really specific tools that are really good at executing open world things, right? So really good tools for biome painting and generation, and they have like a bunch of like inbuilt features that are just like not built into Unreal. Can't really go into specifics here because obviously NDAs and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to run the risk. But I will say that there are some pretty old by this day, but there are some publicly available presentations that they did on, for example, the Dunia engine, which is like really old, but is still that was the engine that I was using for a long time when I was at Ubisoft, and there are some publicly available presentations for that. Same thing with Snowdrop, right? Like another engine that Ubisoft is using in, for example, Massive's case. They have some like publicly available stuff going on that you can just check out in video format. But yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question because overall, it's almost, you could honestly compare it to, if we're doing like a very simplified comparison, you could almost compare it to using Blender versus Max or versus Maya, right? Like all the tools and some of the bells and whistles, most of the core tool set is going to be the same, but there's going to be unique things that like one program has that another program doesn't have, right? MH is saying, I would love to have a gathering, even virtual. It could be really nice. Yeah. Hello, Galazar. Good to see you. Good to see you. Love to have you here. Yeah, I think even like virtual get-togethers and just like hanging out with a bunch of people in the community would be would be really nice. And I'm also gonna need that, you know? Like we're probably gonna be making like a little digital office kind of thing. Mike is saying, which materials or services do you think a material artist should include in their portfolio? For example, I've noticed that many material artists showcase concrete materials. I mean, I think most of them show concrete materials just because that is one of the more common materials that is out there, right? I don't think there is like a check mark of like, oh, if you're doing materials, you need to make this. I think it should be more focused on how you think about material creation and keeping an actual production pipeline in mind. What I mean with that, and this is actually a good shout out for a pretty old workshop at this point with Derek Elshoff. But if you go and check out that workshop that we did like ages ago with Derek, let me actually link you to it, because I think the question that you're asking is a good one, and if I were to boil it down, then I think it's just gonna be like, go watch that workshop, honestly. So let's have a look. Pom pom pom. Let's see. Where is it? Interesting, it's not showing up. Oh no, there it is. I just scrolled right past it. And let me condense what I mean with this, right? So a couple of really inspiring things that I learned from this workshop that I link in the description in the chat now is the thinking of reuse and how can I make tools or make things that are available for reusing and creating consistency between materials, right? Because his workshop was not focused on making one specific material. It was making a biome of materials, which usually comes down to, let's say you're working on an open world area, right? Like an area of the map. As a material artist, what you're going to be in charge of is not you're going to make one sand. No, you have to make a sand and a mud and stone, and all of those things need to be consistent and they need to mesh together. So how are you going to do that? That sort of stuff is really valuable for a material artist to show off. Not that you just can create like a nice material sphere. I want to see you apply your skills towards an actual production environment. So yeah, that is the most important thing. And then you can decide like, okay, I'm gonna make a concrete material, right? And then think about the situation where that concrete material is gonna be used in, and then make a set of materials that can be used together, right? Something like that. Think along those lines. But yeah, also if you want to get some good examples, I think Derek Elshoff, just from his ArtStation, right? If you go check out his ArtStation, there's a lot of really great examples on how to present your work. There's always contextual things going on there. He does a great job of not only showing you like the pretty spheres, but also how to build it in context. Hello, Powertail! We up, let's go! Maddie is saying, hey Tim, I can't wait for the Academy soon. Yes, I want to give a shout out to some of the people that already signed up, because actually we made an announcement recently where if you reach out to me, we are doing some very early testing for like a very discounted price compared to what we're going to be asking in the future. So if you are interested in joining our group lessons, they're going to start next week. So if you want to sign up, send me a message and we can get you involved, and I can send you some links, because it is not publicly available since we're doing like an early access test, right? With a couple of people. Currently we have 3 people signed up already. We want to get somewhere around like 5-ish or maybe even more, but feel free to send me feel free to send me a DM if you're interested in that, and then I can send you some additional information. Marius is saying, what is Marius saying? Hi. I haven't joined in a bit. No, I can remember you, like maybe not last week, but the week before, right? But it's good to see you again, Marius. I hope you're keeping busy. Powertel saying, World Cup tomorrow. Oh, football? Man. There's every year when the World Cup or like football or anything closely related is happening here in Belgium, like people go fucking mental. Like it's it's we get like treats rebranded, you get like flags coming out, like all that kind of stuff, and it always feels like really, I don't know. It is nice, you know. I don't mind that people do it, but for a person that has never enjoyed football, I'm always like, mm. You know, I don't, I don't really get the hype. Yeah, I never understood the hype around football. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like not even football. I think that counts for. I think I think any sport, really. I mean, also to put this into context, you're looking at me most of the time, just sitting on my ass like 8 to 12 hours a week. So of course, it's no surprise that I'm not interested in in any sort of exercise. Oh my god, I don't know if you can hear that. It's fucking bonkers outside. Yeah, and that's the thing, Powertail. Like, I love that you love it, you know? If you loved it since you were a kid, makes total sense to me. Makes total sense to me. Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. And this is the thing, like, what I always enjoy is when people are excited about something, no matter what it is, like I also get excited because they are excited, you know? So if you're talking to me about like football and you're just like really excited and you give me like a bunch of like clues, I love listening to that because I can feel the passion behind it, you know? And that is just like there's a satisfaction in that by itself. Even if the subject doesn't interest me directly, I can still get like secondhand passion, you know? I think that's lovely. Dun, dun, dun. I think it's cool that the World Cup unites the world, though. That's a nice way to look at things. Yeah, but you know who you're talking to, right? I tend to view things in a more cynical way. But you are right. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you are right. Emmy started saying that's Finland with ice hockey. We recently won the World Cup, and you can imagine stuff was crazy. Oh yeah, fucking ballistic. I think, God. So this is how out of the loop I am with like football, right? The only thing that I know is that Belgium specifically has had, I don't know if they still have, you know, because I don't follow it, but has had the best team multiple times when going to the World Cup, and they always came this close and never won. So there's always this like, we're gonna do it this time, yeah, and then at the last minute they just like boop, they just fall through. I think they just like buckle under pressure or something like that. Poor Belgium, I know, and then you immediately see like all the hype just die down. You know, it's like, fuck, it didn't come home this time. Dang it. Hello, Will. Good to see you, everybody. Let's see. Lurking as always, says Marius, but started with a mentorship, so excited. We'll maybe share next Wednesday. Yes, I know. I know that you're starting with a mentorship. I've heard. Better buckle up when it finally happens. I think I mean, who knows, you know? But I think they're never gonna bring it home, you know? I think there's always gonna be like this moment of like, yes, no, what the hell? Who knows? Who knows? It sounds like fun though. Hey Slate, good to see you. It's been a minute. Yeah, taking a break. Taking a break after you published the latest video. Tim, why didn't you say that they will release a gameplay demo video? What? Gameplay demo video? I know nothing about this. Maddie is saying always more of a chance than England. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like okay, so this is my like outside connection to football. I feel that a lot of people in UK football have like a very close relationship with the people that I know here in Belgium that are very passionate about football too, because they have been denied their chance. Even though like every other thing that they could do was just right, they could never manage to make it, you know? No breaks. I'm busy with in real life work and with my new environment project. Let's go. You aren't in charge of the social media marketing? No, and especially because I'm no longer working there, right? My contract ended, so I got no clue. I'm an outsider. I'm a gamer just like you. So, yeah, I am curious because I've only seen the trailer that got released for what was it, the Xbox? The Xbox Game Fest or whatever it's called. Xbox Developer Showcase. And my stuff was in that trailer, which I'm really happy about. So I'm really excited about that. That was really cool. But I have not seen anything else, though. I have not seen anything else. Congrats, Tim. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It does look really nice. I gotta say. The team has been fucking smashing it. Like, I love the way that it looks. And I can't wait for people to get their hands on it. And for me to get my hands on it too, you know? I want to play the game. Hello, little Chode. Good to see you. First time here. What's up? Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. We're just talking about games. Lots of games. Like, oh my god, lots of game announcements. Jesus Christ. It's interesting. There were a couple of things. I think Wild and Chill was like a pretty interesting one. I just love the style. Oh, I just love the style of that game. That was so nice. But I still need to sift through all the indie stuff. You know? Ugh. Feels like a big part of the community is excited about Fable. Yeah, I think so. And I think it's also in the general public. You know, according to like public polls, I think a lot of people have that as like the main thing on their anticipation list or whatever you want to call it, right? This is also from a poll that's like months ago, so maybe that changed, but apparently it is really exciting for people. But yeah, it's been lovely to see like the reception out there, honestly. You never played the old ones? Oh, yeah, it was so good. So good. I really enjoyed it. And I think especially for people that don't want spoilers on a trailer that has been out for a couple of days now, yeah, they're I'll probably not say anything, but there's like a reveal at the end from like a character that got people really excited. That was always interesting. But yeah, I'm really happy to see it. I'm really happy to see it. There was actually another person from our community that was asking to watch another trailer from like Metro, like 2039, because they wanted to know how they did that stuff. Yeah, so that was interesting. Maybe that's something that I can dig into like later down the line. You know, like watching or playing games and then talking about like how they would do something like that. But I would need to think about it. It was a Darth Vader reveal. Yes, it was. We're doing a cheeky Star Wars crossover. You know. No, so many games are doing that already. You know, like even Destiny is kind of doing like a cheeky, like, ooh, it's Star Wars, but not Star Wars, if you know what I mean. That has been received well, I've read. Oh boy. But yeah, it's excited to see that so many people are excited for Fable. I can't wait. Yeah, Star Wars pod racing game looks really cool. Yeah, that's true. That is also like an old game. Oh my god, I used to play that as a kid. I think I had like I had that on a demo disc, if I remember correctly. because there was only like one level or something like that that I could play in. But that was awesome. And it's the same thing with a game that I grew up with as well. I don't know what it's called anymore, but it's like cage racing, and it's like those cars that have like really thick wheels, and you can go on whichever side that you're on, and you can like go on the ceiling and like turn around and do like a bunch of platforms and all that kind of stuff. Those games I grew up with too, like, and it seems like they're trying to somewhat make a comeback. You know, like I think there was like a game in like an announcement a couple of days ago that was kind of trying to capture that, which was really cool to look at. I play the pod racing games at the arcades at Liseberg every time I go. Oh my god, at the arcades! It's been a long time since I've been in an arcade. That's awesome. The sequel for Stellar Blade looks insane to me. I thought it was CGI before it jumped to gameplay. Yeah, I am completely out of the loop when it comes to be frank, anything that's non-Western traditional gaming, you know? So I haven't played Black Myth Wukong, I haven't played Stellar Blade, I haven't played like Nier Automata, like all from what I've heard, like fantastic games. But I'm very specific, you know, like I need to look at a game and it needs to immediately click, otherwise I'm not buying it. And I feel like I'm missing out on like a lot of experiences, but also time. Oh, time. But yeah, this is the thing. Like, if, oh my god, the amount of like awesome, yeah, just like awesome graphical details of games these days. You know, just yeah, it is really interesting to see. Like, I was trying to think about this, right? Because there's always this thing of like, oh my god, can games get any better than this? And I think we're gotten to that point where, like, is it gonna get better? Like, I don't know. I don't know, you know? I feel like we kind of hit this point where it's like, either it needs to not be about the graphics anymore. It needs to be about like incorporating you physically into the game or something like that, you know? When GTA 6 comes out, maybe. I don't think so though. I mean, yeah, because I'm interested to see what is going to happen with games, right? Because we've been on this roller coaster ride of just like chasing hyper realism, right? Or like realism for the longest time. And it feels like we're getting closer and closer. And the budgets to reach it now, and the amount of artists that you need to get there to push that like final 10% is fucking mental. Right? So I think that's why we're seeing, okay, we don't have the development budgets anymore, right? I mean, we do have development budgets, but not like they keep pushing. I mean, not talking about like a game like GTA 6 because they fucking print money, right? Even with 5 still. But the general game studios, like, they don't really have that budget to kind of keep pushing, right? And that's where I think art direction comes more into play again. And we're seeing more established, quote-unquote, realistic developers kind of branching out and like exploring different art styles, I feel, at least. Because I think, and this is something that I felt for the longest time, is that the more that we chase realism, right, there is something that gets lost in chasing that realism too. Because I remember as a kid, the games looked horrible. But I remember being so much more immersed in them because my brain had to do a lot of thinking to make up for the pixels that weren't present, right? And that is still true to this day. Like, you play like an old game, and sure, the graphics look shit, but you have to kind of tell your mind to make up like the missing pixels, right? Which is always something that I liked, where in newer games what is happening is that you just have it right there, so you just have to take them in, you know? Like you're just taking in the pixels. You're not really thinking and processing anymore. It's just about like experiencing it. Which I think is good in terms of like... Which I think is good in terms of like if you just want to have like a chill game, right? You don't really have to do a lot of thinking anymore. Yeah, Will and Maddie are saying the same thing, right? Like kind of like reading a book in some way. Yeah. Yeah, because and it can happen in any format, right? The same thing happens with like the reveal of like a monster in like a horror movie, right? As soon as they do that, the magic is gone, right? But the anticipation and you're just making up this like crazy weird thing in your head, and if they never show it, that remains there, right? You made up this thing in your head that is now living with you, right? There's no release of it. Which is also why I always loved like The Witcher, like the first Witcher movie or something like that, right? Because they never did a reveal. It was just like, oh no, it's this thing. We don't see the thing. It's just like this ethereal kind of like you can't touch it kind of thing, which is awesome. And I think the same thing, we're making some weird parallels here, but like that's the way that I look at like old games where I was looking at top down, I don't know, like 500 pixels on my screen, and I was still more immersed in some of those games than I've been in the majority of games, not all, the majority of games that I've played recently, which is interesting. Slate is saying, I personally think that if the game is creative enough, realism in graphics won't matter. It's just that most realistic games are boring. Yeah, I think that's also a good point, right? I think there needs to be a balance, and I was actually talking today with Will about this, that there needs to be a balance between like chasing the graphics, but then not losing sight about like the art direction, right? And I feel like sometimes we kind of chase the pixels instead of the art direction, which also means that we spend like way too much time on doing like stupid things that no one's going to care about in games in general, right? But yeah. So thanks for coming to my TED talk. Abstract Duck, I assume there's a difference between realism and definition. Diminishing returns hit hyperrealism hard. Yeah. Because at a certain point, like it can't be sustainable to make like money from that, right? Like if you need like, I don't know, the best quality artist that can do like hyper-realistic games and then have the best engineers to make it run in real time and all that kind of stuff, you know? Like, oof. Almost like a podcast, these discussions. Don't you bring it up, Marius. How dare you bring up a podcast? Me and Will were talking about this today. Oh my god. The amount of mentions that a podcast still gets. But I'm hyped for the new COD. Yeah, I mean, there was an interesting thing. I think last year it happened where there was a new game release. And it looked like really I think it was 2 years ago or something like that. It was a new game release and they showed a trailer and I was like, dude, this looks sick. And then at the end, it was just like a new season from Call of Duty. And I was like, no, it's Call of Duty? Come on. I mean, I don't play Call of Duty, right? But I was really hoping that it was going to be like a new IP. And it was like, no, it's going to be more Call of Duty. I was like, no, come on. Swan is saying just go outside for realism. How dare you? How dare you suggest such diabolical suggestions? Outside? Ew. Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true, Powertail. Crossfire? Yeah. That was interesting. When I saw their logo, I was like, oh shit. It's finally time. That was really interesting to see. That was really interesting. Yeah. And I want to congratulate all of them on like their reveal because that looked really cool. Even though, again, not my type of game that I would necessarily play, you know, it would be more like a thing that I'm probably gonna check out when it's like in deep sale. But it did look really, really cool though. It did look really, really cool. Do you think Gaussian splats ever make it into the gameplay pipeline? First of all, caveat: I don't know enough about Gaussian splatting because I've never tried. I've never tried it myself. From what I've seen, I follow some interesting people that are doing some Gaussian splatting that then also like build collision and all that kind of stuff into it too, so that the world becomes more interactive. But I don't know about the performance restrictions or translation into a gameplay pipeline. So I can't really speak to that. Because I think it's an interesting technology, right? Because the way that I look at it, it is just... This is going to sound very reductive, right? But it's just a more efficient way of doing photogrammetry way quicker. That's the way that I think about it. And then I'm like, huh. I mean, you could potentially use that technology in that sort of way. But this is the thing. I don't know what that means to translate Gaussian splats to actual like vertex geometry and then doing that, right? Because I've only heard that is like very experimental still. But to make Gaussian splatting work in a gameplay, like in an engine setting, it would probably require that you have like an engine that is kind of built around Gaussian splatting to make the most sense of it, I would assume. Yeah. So who knows? Some crazy person in game dev is going to come up with like a Gaussian splatting engine and make like a full game out of it, for sure. It's so exciting to see that the studio, based on just wanting to bring those games back. I will... Oh, sorry, I missed the first thing. So I will say, though, that That's No Moon is a bunch of passionate devs trying to bring that into light. That is in reply to, like, MH. Kind of missed the days where games had photo textures to some degree. PBR still feels nice. Oh, no. Like, no, you're talking about... Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, though. Like... A lot of people in game dev are freaking passionate about it, right? Sure, you're listening to me a lot of the time, and I can be like pretty sour or like, to put it amicably, like be somewhat neutral about things, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm like really, really passionate about it still, right? There's a bunch of people. Oh my god, there's not even a bunch of people. I think like 99% of the people that I talk to are freaking passionate about building games. The issue is, or one of the issues is, that we went from a very passionate first industry when it was just like people in their garages like banging together machines to then make games, right? Back in the 80s and 90s and all that shit. To now, where it's like a massive industry that's making billions and all that kind of stuff, which then requires you to build things in a formulaic way, right? And that has some ramifications on like how creative and how passionate, well, not passionate, you can still be passionate, but like how creative you can express the things that you do in a game, right? I was literally talking to Will about this today, just like random ramblings. But did you guys know that in Skyrim there are like ants on tree stumps? Like they literally have like tiny little ants walking on tree stumps in Skyrim. They have been there since release. Again with the ants, I know. But yeah, that stuff. Booting up Skyrim now. Which version? Are you playing it on your Microsoft, like, Microsoft fridge? Never got close enough to a tree in Skyrim? Yeah. Well, see, but that's what I mean, right? Like, that is just like an indication of people just being passionate about the game that they're building, and a team that is small enough for random shit to literally just get into the game because a guy felt that it needed to be into the game, right? That stuff right now doesn't happen as much anymore. It just doesn't. Because, well, especially in like larger games, right? Like in smaller games for sure, but like in larger games, there's no way. Because everything needs to be organized, everything gets cataloged, like everything, blah, 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 you know? ants on the trees where they just copy pasted the same dungeon layout everywhere. Wait, hey. It's smart. It's smart work, you know? If you listen to some of the interviews that they did with like when Bethesda was making those games, oh my god, it is actually crazy how they made some of these games, right? Especially I'm talking about like Oblivion and also what was it before? No, you had like Morrowind, Oblivion, and then you had like before you had Arena, right? I never played Arena. But like if you hear about the dev stories behind like Morrowind. Oh yeah, Daggerfall was in between there too, right? But yeah, anyway, like you had developers talking about like their time in Morrowind, and it is literally just like a handful of people making this massive open world and just throwing shit in to kind of get it to work. And I'm simplifying this dramatically, right? But then putting in like way more hours than they're supposed to, and just like richly crunching, like voluntary crunching, just like having so much fun, but also like fucking like going mental. We're just like trying to build this game at the same time. And it was just like a completely different industry, you know? Dang. Jesus. It's going mental outside. Let's see. The only field in game dev that still has more creative freedom is concept art. Sometimes I envy concept artists so much. I think you're overestimating like how much creative freedom they have. Sure, like they get to brainstorm, right? They get to brainstorm a lot. And they get to come up with like a lot of creative ideas. But the downside of that is that they have to literally do like tens to hundreds, if not thousands of things. That's the downside of being a concept artist, right? That's the sole reason. That's one of the main reasons why they're there, is because 2D is cheaper than 3D. So they try to figure out a lot of stuff in 2D before they then send it off to 3D, right? I mean, ideal scenario, but yeah, but there is a thing though that I still like about being a concept artist, is that the iteration time between things. Let's say you're doing personal work as like concept artist. Sure, you still have to like learn all the skills, and it takes a long time and all that kind of stuff. But once you kind of get there, and you can make like a painting like in a week, right? Pretty easily. Sure, you can take time on like passion projects and all that kind of stuff too, right? Which you should do. But trying to apply that same sort of thinking to like an environment art project, oh my god. Yeah. Have fun with that. But yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. And that's not to say that there's still a lot of creative energy within games, right? It's just that the whole business kind of surrounded itself by just like, yeah, bigger and better and more money, and that means that everything needs to be more streamlined, right? It's more about the product than the journey towards that product, right? Abstract is saying there's also no time to have a break and focus on the fun of the product during crunch. I think also, and here's the thing, like there might, for sure there's that too, right? Like during crunch, like you're so focused, you're so mentally drained. I've never had to do crunch. I'm happy. I will say this gladly. I don't want it. But I can imagine that during crunch, when you're like really crunching, that it just matches all the days together. At a certain point, you don't know which day is which anymore, and it's not conducive to good results, especially not in the long term. It just makes no sense, right? But yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I think what actually is interesting, I think there's also, this is gonna sound like really, really straightforward and like stupid, right? As I'm gonna say it, but I'll explain why. There's also less willingness for people to do crunch. This sounds weird, right? And it makes total sense. But to me, that makes sense in the relationship that you have to the product. Because if I have to imagine, like back in the old school days, you're getting together with a bunch of your friends and you're just making a game that you're really passionate about, that's what it was back in the day, right? And sure, it can still be with indie games and all that kind of stuff. But in a AAA, on a AAA level, you are so far removed from having an actual like impact or creative impact on the end product that it feels so distant that it can only become a job, in my opinion, or in my experience at least. Which is something that, yeah, it is difficult to marry the two, right? Because you can't be involved. It is unrealistic to be involved in like every part of the project when you're working on like a project that has a 500 to like 1,000 people in it, you know. That is just unrealistic. But I think, again, in that scaling up of the industry, we kind of lost, like, you know, that ownership, that individual ownership that you have over the thing that you're contributing to the game, right? And some companies, they do manage it really well, where you do get like that individual ownership, and you can have a say over the thing that you're doing and your expertise, right? But yeah, that's not guaranteed. Yeah, sorry, just going on a ramble here, but because I think to me, that is the thing that I always think about, is that I think a lot of people would actually be fine to do potential overtime or even crunch if it was like voluntary, because they are looking to put a game on the market that they are really passionate about, and then also the second thing, also get like financial benefit from, right? In proportion to the effort that they're putting in, which is also a big thing. Yeah. Hello, Dale. Hello, Dale. Good to see you. Rio Mendes is saying, I think games will change, though. I think Expedition 33 opened the eyes of a lot of people. Those $400 million games will be less and less. I don't think so. Well, okay, so I agree with you from a broad perspective, right? I think those $400 million games will be less and less so. And I agree in the sense that the capital has somewhat dried up. So there's going to be less capital for those games. But I think the capital, currently at least, seems to be flowing towards the games that are even more expensive and more ambitious. Because it is still a numbers game to a certain degree, right? Because for every studio that you give like a decent amount of funding to, that has the same ambition as like Expedition 33, a lot of them are not going to make it. Or they make a game that is good. That is fine. But it's not going to be the Expedition 33, right? So I think you are right that it's showing. But here's the thing, though. Like, I feel like indie developers have been showing this for the longest time, that you can do things that are still ambitious on like a shoestring budget, right? Those games are dying left and right. Look at the games that are being successful, like Pragmata. Look at Marathon. Yeah, but Marathon is an interesting one, because I still have the feeling that is more to do with PlayStation's overall overall push. I mean, I'm not gonna say that like Bungie didn't have like a say in the matter, right? Because they definitely did. But I still feel that like PlayStation was heavily involved in that decision. And then for Bungie to make a decision to make like a very niche game with a niche art style in like a niche genre, right? Or like a niche take on the genre, that is a crazy move to do for like a company that size. Right? Because I can sit here all day and praise for like more creative games, but if you're at a studio at that size, you have to make them sense in like a business sense too, right? And I think there are going to be studios that are going to figure out how to do things like smarter and cheaper for sure. But I don't think, I don't think the big budget games where you literally have like hundreds of people working on like a massive open world game are going to go anywhere. I think the way that I look at it is that we have like a very thriving, let's say, bottom section of the market, like your indie games and like all that kind of stuff. You know, there's like a bunch of like really creative things and like really inspiring things, and a lot of people starting up their own thing there. And I think the middle has sort of gone, right? Traditionally referred to as like double A. I think a lot of those developers are gone. Maybe I'm focusing too much on the Western market, but that's at least the way that I look at things. And then you have just like the upper echelon of just like your big AAA developers. They also get like more and more funding. But I feel like if you're in the middle, it becomes like really difficult. Because even if you look at some studios like, let's say, Sumo Digital, for example, right? Like, let's call that like a AA developer. They were doing, well, you could kind of call it like AAA developer. Whatever's the case, they pivoted to being like an outsourced studio, right? Because they were like, hey, look, like making your own game thing is just gonna be like, ugh. Let's see, Rio Mendes is saying, I think AAA will become AA size, and indies will become AA quality. Interesting. So let's dissect that a bit, right? So you think that like AAA will become AA size? There is an interesting trend there that could maybe support what you're saying, right? Because I do have the feeling that a lot of, well, is that true? I feel like there's a lot of conversation going on about specifically downsizing core teams, working more with contractors, and working more with co-developers and outsourced studios. I think that has been happening, especially from like an American lens. That is definitely true, right? I don't know if that is a global trend, but I definitely know from like an American standpoint, like they just can't make the financials work anymore, right? So they're looking into those ways of like making production cheaper by still having a core developer group that is paid really well, and then dealing with a lot of co-developers and outsource. So yeah, and then indies will become AA quality. AA quality. I would, yeah, yeah. Saw the, yeah. That's what I was thinking, McVal. So that was one of my. So I've got two examples of like contradicting the point that I was just making, right? That's why I was saying maybe it's only American studios, and I'm kind of thinking out loud here, right? Because if you look at CD Projekt Red, they move development all over the place, right? They have like multiple hubs now, one in Boston, one over there, blah, 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 blah. Larian is doing the same thing, right? They only used to have like, I think a Ghent studio, maybe one in the UK. Now they have like, I don't even know how many locations, but like 6 or 7 or something like that across the world. And I think if you listen to like interviews with them, it's more to do with like the 24/7 development, which is just like, oh, as soon as you ramp down in this time zone, then a time zone over there is going to be spinning back up people, and you have this like continual development that's going on around the globe, and that really streamlines it. Even though, yeah, apparently that's why they're doing it. So yeah, I don't know. I think when it comes to like shrinking AAA games, it might be only the American market, maybe. AAA things, right now, you need to have so much middle management, and you have to run things through so many people just to change the color of an object. Jeff Kaplan said on a podcast that you need things to go back to what it was. Artists, game designers, and programmers. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do agree with that. Yeah, and I think that's 100% right, because I mean, I think that I agree with it, But I think also the reality of actually running a team that is like multiple hundreds of people, you cannot only have artists, designers, and programmers. You need someone to facilitate communication, because otherwise someone else who is an artist has to facilitate communication, right? Which is taken away from your job. At a certain point, and that's also, he said the same thing in like one of his live streams, right? Like Jeff Kaplan. He said that, I think he's like, I don't know what the exact quote would be, but I think he was talking about like team sizes, and that's also why they didn't want to grow to like a certain amount of size, because he realized that at a certain amount, roughly, let's say after 70 people, it becomes really difficult to manage communication. And that's where like middle management can really thrive, right? Because then you have like people talking to other people, just to talk to other people. That's where it gets like, it spirals out of control a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I've noticed this as well, right? Like my first company that I joined was, I can't remember the exact number, but at least the team that I was working on, we had less than 10 artists, and I think the whole development on that was like 50 people or something like that, right? Then I joined Ubisoft. It was like a new studio within like the big Ubisoft umbrella. We were a really small team in the beginning. We were like a group of like 20 to 30 people, like just making stuff. That was awesome. And then it grew over time, but they never really grew to a certain amount that was unmanageable. But you're still working with like thousands of people on certain projects, you know, which is mental. Because like you said, I've had experiences where I wanted to do a thing that I could easily do by myself if I was given access to certain things, but then wasn't allowed to because I needed to follow a protocol that was not in my hands, that I needed to talk to another person, blah, 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 right? And then eventually didn't do it. So that also happens, for sure. That's why I'm agreeing with you. But yeah, it is how do you then retain smooth communication while also emphasizing like creative input from everyone else, right? And I think that's a really, really difficult thing to balance. Because I think, yeah, sure, like we have a lot of middle managers, right? But I want to trust in the people that join like a games company, that they are really genuine in trying to solve the issues. It's just that trying to solve communication on a creative project with like 500 people is fucking difficult. That's not an easy thing to do either. But I agree. I think a lot of people are realizing, and the people that I talk to that are like fellow devs, a lot of realization is coming down where they're like, I've worked in the big stuff and it was okay, right? They genuinely enjoyed like the projects that they worked on. Even when it was hard, you know, they still believed in the end product and all that kind of stuff. But I think you're going to get to a time where it's like, okay, like, is this the only thing that I'm going to be doing? And I think a lot of people are, especially when you look at like what happened in the last couple of years, where so many people are losing their jobs, it puts like a lot of reflection on what you've done as a job over the last couple of decades, right? In certain people's cases. And yeah, that's why we're seeing so much movement. And I think that movement is like very positive. Because it's, to me, that's why I was always excited. Sure, like layoffs and all that kind of stuff, horrendous. I don't wish that on anything or on anyone. And I luckily managed to kind of dodge and weave through all that kind of stuff, right? But I think what has also happened at the same time is that a really positive and like engaged and passionate new layer of the industry has been built in its place as well. So people that left or got fired, some of them decided to then build something new from scratch with a different philosophy behind it. And that's the thing that I'm really excited about, to see where those studios are going to go to. Sure, a lot of them are not going to make it. That's just the nature of like any business. But I'm excited to see which are the ones that will. Because there's so much passion, so much creativity that is still left on the table. That's what I'm excited for. Conceptual Vision is saying Grinding Gear Games has sort of hit a gold mine with their business model. Yeah, I mean they're doing really well, right? They're doing really well for themselves. Darpan is saying, hi Timothy, I just watched the Metro 2039 trailer and every shot they looked. Oh, this is the image that you sent, right? the image that you sent to me on Discord, right? We're probably not going to watch the trailer today because I do need to get onto feedbacking. But yeah, that would be interesting. I talked about this in the beginning, but it would be interesting to kind of look at some trailers and just like try to break it down a little bit. Maybe that's something for the future. 100%. What best rat job in the industry from a job security perspective? What do you mean rat job? Like a job where you don't have to do anything and just hopefully, well, do the least amount of stuff and just get by? Because I think you might be looking at the wrong industry, buddy. I don't think games is a thing where you want to do that. Because even if you join as like a junior, you will be expected to work. Like there's no way to hide. And from like a job security perspective, man, also, I mean, last couple of years you've seen it, you know, like, yeah. I mean, the job you're not likely to get fired mid-project. I think you're looking well. So here's the thing: like, I don't think games companies they want to fire you mid-project, right? That is usually not the goal. And I'm not talking about like the massive ones, right? For example, like whenever Meta like lays off like a bunch of people, that is just like at a certain point it just becomes about numbers, not about people. Most of the studios that I've worked for, they still care, right? But they also run into the business limitations too, right? If you have a dry spell of like investor funding and you're really struggling with your game, as a business, as a CEO of a business, you will have to make the tough choices. And I don't think that like games is something that you want to look into if the main thing that you care about is job security. I want to be very open and honest about that. I myself, in partial reason, beyond extent exists because I realize that job security is not really a thing. This is a... I want to be careful with this, right? Because I don't want you to think that there are no places where you can build a career. But on average, I think that is a really difficult thing to do in this fast-moving industry that is games. And I think that's just a reality in general. Because I will also gladly say it is, right? And I've always said this. I think for a lot of people, Ubisoft is that company. Ubisoft is that company that really appreciates you being the person, being a part of a team, and you can keep your job, and it is really people-centric. But even they run into financial restrictions, right? So there's going to be hard decisions at some point. And then, you know, whatever shenanigans is going on now with like the business restructuring to like spin off in like multiple subsidiaries and all that kind of stuff, that is also not filling me with a bunch of confidence either. But all before all that kind of stuff, like Ubisoft was kind of like the at least a company that I would go to. Or like not go to, but like think of if you talk about like job security. Like honestly. Which might sound weird to a lot of people, but that's generally what I think. Because my time at Ubisoft was really well respected. And yeah, a lot of the people that work there, they are still there. Yeah. And they seem to enjoy it still. That doesn't mean that they haven't gone through the shitter, you know? Like there's definitely aspects of it where there have been studios that have just been closed, you know? And projects that have been cancelled and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is, I think the difference there is that with Ubisoft, you don't hear about cancellations, and then just hearing about like, oh, they just fired like 5,000 people. They are being like very, very selective about where they need to trim the fat, right? Well said. Looking at Ubisoft from the outside is pretty chaotic and nonsensical at times, especially recently. Yeah, but the interesting thing there is that is usually coming from the top, right? And obviously that's most of the news that we get to see, right? Which makes sense because I mean, the leadership at Ubisoft is interesting to say the least. You know, some of the things that they say, and there's some like really stupid blunders, right? Like mispronouncing the game, like a name from the game that is going to be the biggest game that you want to push out, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Conceptual Vision is asking, don't they have like 19,000 employees? Yeah, they do. I think I'm not sure about this, but aren't they like the biggest employer in games? At a certain point, they were up to like 24,000, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Co-dev studios are typically more secure, but nowhere is immune from layoffs. Yeah, that was an interesting like, Craig. It's good that you mentioned that because I think there is an interesting talking point there. I think you are right in the sense that a co-development studio has the potential security of landing multiple contracts, and then one contract, if that falls down, they still have the other stuff. So you're almost like diversifying your income sources, right? Which makes a lot of sense from like a business aspect, right? So yeah. That does make sense. But like you said, nobody's immune. I know co-development studios that are also like just not not great, or like not in a great position, and then they shut down, you know. But from like a business perspective, it kind of does make sense, right? If you think about it that way, where you can have like multiple clients. But yeah, if timing is bad, you are still this is the interesting thing about a co-development studio. You are then dependent on someone else coming knocking at your door, right? Whereas, let's say you're Ubisoft, you can spin up like a new project because there's always stuff in the works, right? And you're making your own games. And I guess you could technically do that with a co-development studio. You could have like an internal project going on, but usually those internal projects don't pan out because think about it from like a skill perspective, right? You have a really talented team that is really good at working together with another team, but they're not really good at building their own technology and, well, mostly technology, you know? So, and that's what you need to build like your own game. So you're almost asking like, okay, we're really good at this, but if we then want to secure ourselves and make our own games, then we need to spin up like a whole team and hire programmers and all that kind of stuff to do this thing that may or may not be panning out. And then that becomes like a money sink and a time sink and all that kind of stuff again, right? So yeah, it's very difficult. But in a large sense, I like those conversations where I can't remember. I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about this, that some studios are now switching to the co-development model just in the sense of like trying to protect themselves from the industry's whims a little bit more, because then they can work with like more studios. And I think honestly, I don't know their strategy, but I think that's actually the plan for Sumo Digital, right? They were making a lot of their own games, and now they're trying to get into co-dev because of that reason, right? Like diversification. Multiple contracts help, but if enough clients start to struggle, then the issues can be passed on to the co-development studios too. Yeah. Because I mean, the thing is, like, if you're a co-development studio, that essentially means that you might not be an essential part of the development process, right? So they can decide like, hey, we are struggling financially. We're just going to cut our budget. And that also means that co-development is now done. And we're just going to focus on the stuff that we have control over, right? I think both can be smart, co-development while building your own project. Yeah, but that is so fucking difficult, right? Think about, there's this really good really good interview with the developers, or like I think it's the CEO from like Halo Studios or 343 Industries, as it was referred to before, right? Where they were talking about the reasons because why they switched, first of all, to calling it Halo Studios, and then also their switch to Unreal Engine. Because before, what they were doing is they were building tech and building a game at the same time. And the reason why they switched to Unreal was because they realized that like building the tech and the game and scaling both at the same time was really, really difficult. So they just decided like, hey, we're going to worry less about the tech and we're just going to focus on the game. Rebrand to Halo Studios and just focus on the game itself. And then use Unreal Engine to provide the tech for you, right? That doesn't mean that they don't have like programmers and all that kind of stuff on staff, right? I'm assuming so. But that does mean that the burden falls less on like building an expansive team of programmers and engine programmers and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it is interesting, right? Like it has a lot of ramifications if you want to turn something like that around. It takes a long time. You're building up skill sets and you're hiring the right people and trying to have them all in the right place at the right time. It's difficult. It's difficult. And especially if you think about those scales, right? Crazy. And that's the thing. Like I don't envy like a CEO of a studio or like the, let's say the upper management for a studio in the actual act of like trying to pivot a studio into this new direction and making a smooth transition. That stuff sounds fucking bonkers to me. Dale is saying, didn't 343 also have the issue where the core devs were contracted, I'm assuming, on the game engine, left, and then the team left behind had difficulties trying to sort out the mess of learning the game engine? Maybe. I didn't hear about that. But I mean, that could also make sense, right? And also in general, like hiring people to work on like engine tech is probably going to be way more expensive, right? Just in general. So if you're trying to save costs, might be a good avenue to check. And going back to the Ubisoft talk that we had before, I know that Massive did their voluntary resignation stuff. Not sure if that was all of Ubisoft. I'm not sure about that either, but I think that's the way that they kind of have been doing things for the long term, right? Like if there's a downturn, they will just not rehire people from some of the positions. And just by the nature of being at that scale, people are gonna leave by their own accord when they finish a project or, you know, like whenever they get a new opportunity and all that kind of stuff, right? And this is the thing, I said this all the way back when the first sign of like the layoffs were starting like a couple of years ago, right? I was really interesting to see what Ubisoft was gonna do in that specific case. Because if, let's say, you increase the friction on the job market, right? You make everyone scared to leave their current position. That means that the traditional strategy for like a company like Ubisoft, where they do like soft resignations or voluntary resignations, also doesn't work anymore, you know? Or like it works to like a lesser degree than it otherwise would have, because now good luck finding another job, if you know what I mean. So yeah. Yeah, it seems like they did make it true though. Swan is saying, I know Powertail has the hand locked and loaded. Yes. Talking about the hand, we're diving into some feedback. If you're in the chat, feel free to raise your hand. Of course it's fucking Powertail. Oh my god. Lily was second. It was a close second, honestly. It was a close second. Oh my god. Okay, cool. We got many hands today. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes. I had it ready. Yeah. This is fun. I like it. So, should we keep like a scoreboard, you know? Oh my god. Unreal Engine 5 games all feel very similar though. Emphasis on feel. That one is an interesting one. Because I think that mostly falls on developers. You know? Because I think if you do a good job and you have it running in Unreal, I think you can't tell. Or like it becomes harder to tell, right? But yeah, Lily is saying yes, top one gets a custom role with the server. That would be fun. Okay, Power Tail. Let's have a look. Let's switch it over to some feedback. Maybe not that one. Maybe let's do this one instead. Here we go. Cool. Okay. Let's have a look here. You are getting ready to post. Awesome. Love to see it. Let me get some additional context here. Excited to finally say that I'm about ready to render this one out for this feedback session. So I'm looking for any final changes and slight tweaks that you can spot. Next week, I'll be asking for some feedback on the breakdowns and alternative renders to get everything ready for the big post day. Let's go. Congratulations on that, Alejandro. I appreciate it. And you're doing a fantastic job. Okay, so final feedback. I think if we're really talking about like final tweaks, I would spend the majority of my time focusing on how can we put a little bit of an emphasis on the story, right? I think we talked about like the story here a lot, doing something with this little area, slight light, something like that, is definitely going to be the first thing to look at, right? So anything that you can do with the lighting, I would add something here to kind of emphasize or draw the attention to that little area a bit more. That is potentially what I would do. Slight stuff, right? Like slight tweaks like that are going to be helpful. When it comes to anything else, you're saying small tweaks. I would probably just focus most of my attention on post-processing and adding in like a little bit of volumetric fog or something like that. Something where we can add. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this when we were doing the team challenges, right? Whenever we were doing the team challenge, not the last one, but the one before, you know how much difference that like fog pass we did? Like, that's what I want you to do on this environment. Very subtle, but it can add a lot of volumetric feel to, a lot of volumetric detail and depth to the scene, right? You're doing a good job of it in the background. I want to see some stuff happening in the foreground for this stuff too. So yeah, fog, etc. could be really good. So that could be something to look into. Yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't even see this. I didn't even see that you had all this fishnetting here. I think if you want to do fishnetting, I would combine it with the other assets that you have. And I'm going to be annoying because it's not going to be like a small tweak. But try to have it, like, I don't know, tied around the beam and then something like this where you have like the fishnetting. Just like kind of just like, I don't know. Make it a little bit more interesting to look at, or kind of have, I don't know, a straight section that then goes up and then it's like tied together or something like that, you know? Maybe they're fixing it. Whatever you can do to make this area more interesting. And if you're doing fishnetting, oh dude, like scatter it more, you know? Like, I still want you to increase like the amount of assets that you have. Like, just use things that you already have lying around and just like go wild a little bit, right? Do some little tweaks here and there. Have some fishnetting hanging. Think about it in a modular way. Tie it all together with some rope. Yeah, wherever you see like any opportunity, right? Like just, I don't know, some fishnetting here maybe. Some fishnetting here. Anywhere where you can kind of see, like, fill it up a little bit more. Clutter it a little bit more, right? Again, I don't want you to make like a bunch of new stuff. Reuse stuff you already have. Stuff's looking good enough. Just use more of it, right? More fishnets and really play around with the silhouettes, right? Because you could easily just use the rope that you have the rope just in the middle, and then at the outer border of the fish netting, and then have the fish netting kind of as like the interior of it, right? Recycling tips, yes, 100%. Like at this stage, this is also something that we do a lot during the team challenges, by the way. Last week, I focused a lot on this stuff, looking at what's available and how can we reuse as much as possible without having to create like anything new or barely anything new to really fill up the sea, right? Because you could have some fish netting in the foreground as well. You could have like a foreground element here. What will we do? What kind of shape? Right, like just some stuff hanging in the foreground. You might have like a rope pile that we can put here. Try to be careful about this little area. This area, I would just make that completely dark. So make sure that we don't have like anything like weird on the side of the frame that is just like grabbing our attention. Just darken that up. Yeah, and then let's see, what else can we do? Maybe, what else can we do? Let's see. You have a bucket. We're making a bucket on a rope. Just straight rope around the latch, just bucket hanging. A couple of buckets hanging here. Bucket, you know? Okay, hang stuff up, make simple, because, oh my god, this is the fun part. And I need to stop myself. I need to stop myself from like keep doing the stuff. But the stuff that I drew here, it's not going to take you too long, right? It's just looking at like, oh, this has a hole. Okay, cool. I'm just going to weave like a bit of rope through it, tie it together. Cool. Now I have like a basket that I can hang, right? Maybe there's some other stuff that you can use as well. Because I know that you have these baskets, use them more as well. Maybe you can do something cool where you just change the shape a little bit. You just like do a soft select, you just warp them a little bit, make them look a little bit different. You're good to go. And just literally hang this full of shit, you know? Think about... This is the moment where you could actually use, let's say, the Witcher TV series or something like that. You know, think about like an area that kind of looks like this. Look at your... Look at like a series that does this, like a TV series, and then just try to see like how dense they go, right? Because you can get a real good feel of just like how dense they go with this kind of stuff. But yeah, more stuff, more stuff. But keep it easy, right? Look at what you have available and use that. Here you got like a pile of these bags. Right? Have like a stack of them here. Just stack them on top of each other. Have it like slightly tilted over. And yeah, fill out the whole scene. MH is saying paint overboard analysis is so much more useful and reassuring. Reassuring your mind. Always great to organize stuff when I feel lost in a project. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's also a good shout. I see some people doing this in the community as well, just doing like a little bit of a paint over. Yeah, 100%. A Knight of the Old of the Seven Kingdoms has some cool town shots. Okay, cool. Thank you for the suggestion, McFell. So that could be like a show that you could look at potentially. But yeah, it just comes down to like really filling up like all the individual bits, right? Like making the most of like some of the silhouettes. Maybe there's like a small bucket here. It's gonna be a black silhouette anyway. So if you have like the barrel, a pile of ropes, and then just like a small bucket, the foreground element becomes like a little bit more interesting to look at, right? And maybe what we'll do here is something like this, so that you can still see this silhouette as well. Yeah. And Mage is saying maybe add some ivy or some kind of vegetation in the area. Yeah, I'm trying to stay away from that. With the specific reason that we're getting so close to rendering, right? It's not that it's a bad idea necessarily. But yeah. Basically, what I'm doing with the ropes and all the hanging stuff is basically the same kind of like shapes and all that kind of stuff you get with like vegetation, right? Because you can do a lot, which is like still, I know that we talked about ropes a lot of the time already. You can really do a lot with like the more ropes even, you know, and then linking everything together. Let's go crazy. Go crazy. Make it really feel filled with stuff. All right. Summarizing. Focus on the main part, right? Focus on the story element. Add a little bit of a light. Have like the doors like slightly open, something like that. Easy stuff. Then I would say adding more stuff to the scene, right? Reuse as much as you can. Not making new stuff. Reusing stuff that already exists. Focus on easy stuff. And then looking to adding fog. Adding a little bit of volumetric, like atmospherical effects, like in the scene. That can help like increase the depth a lot. Be very subtle about it. Then do post-processing and rendering, then you're good. But yeah. Like other people are saying in the chat as well, well done, man. Like this has come a long way. Really cool. I would just give it another week. Really try to put in a lot of these details. And that's it, you know? That's it. Final push. Then potentially render it out. Take a little bit of a break for like, let's say a week or something like that. A couple of days to a week. Then do all the breakdown shots with like renewed vigor and some new eyes. And then post it. That's what I would do. But yeah, good stuff. I'll even give you a star, you know? Oh, wait. Here's a star. You get a star. Cool stuff, Powerhotel. Good job. Final push, buddy. Thank you for the suggestions, Tim. And thank you, everyone. Yes. Good behavior star. Exactly. Enjoy that. Enjoy that. Next up is Lily. Oh, before we do so, Topg is actually asking a good question, Powertail. Do you plan to submit this environment for the rookies? Good question. Let's have a look at Lily's work. Lily's starting a new project, Tranquility Garden. Love it. I have your references in small. I don't know if we're going to use that for this session, but we'll see. But your main question was story, right? You had this story of the environment is basically taking place in a world where technology perished, right? So technology is gone, forgotten, all that kind of stuff, and nature is taking over again. I did play some Offering at a Shrine based on Valentine's feedback, which is let's see. Yeah. Civilization in the game lives pretty primitively. Okay, cool. I don't want to get super deep into world building, but I could look into it. That's fine. Yeah. I think what I really want to focus on is you mentioned that the world is taking place where technology has perished, right? And nature is taking over again. It depends on your interpretation, right? What I would say in regards to the story, I would want you to really think about what that means for you when you say this is a world where technology has perished, right? Because that can have a lot of effects, right? Because you could almost make it a story where instead of like this stone shrine, the shrine is literally just like an old phone or something like that, right? and you could kind of play on the themes that is just like, I don't know, it's a shrine. This is my first go-to meeting, and this is so outside of the scope or anything that you mentioned, right? But I'm already thinking about what's that game called from Obsidian, where you play as like little shrunken kids in the garden fighting against like insect animals and all that kind of stuff, right? You all know what I mean. Grounded, that's the one. I was almost imagining something like this, right? Where like the phone is actually a shrine, and then you could almost imagine that it's taken over by like an insect or something like that, and they kind of use it as like their own little shrine or something, you know? Yeah, thank you, Swan. That is where my mind went to. Not sure if you want to go for that, because I also get the feeling from like the umbrella like foliage that we are dealing with miniature stuff anyway. And maybe that is the intent, maybe it's not. But that's the way that I'm reading this, right? Because you got some like barrels here. What would you say? Like, because if a barrel is this big, okay, maybe there is something where we need to think about the scale, right? Because these almost feel like tiny bits of foliage, but then compare that to the oil barrels that you have, and there's already like a contrast in the proportions here, right? Or like in the scale of things. So maybe that's where I'm already going wrong in my head. Because yeah, I would almost imagine that if this is like a miniature world, then I would imagine that the barrel is going to be like, I don't know. This is going to be the side of the barrel, right? Something like that. But I'll leave it up to you, right? That was just like my first idea, but it is really thinking about like, okay, how do we visualize technology has perished and nature has taken over, right? Because we could do that in a way where you have like insects almost like worshipping the shrine. You could also have that in a more stereotypical way of like abandoned stuff, right? So like abandoned places where they just had to leave all of a sudden, and then there's like a hole in the roof, and then you have like foliage taking over the environment and it's growing on top of like the, I don't know, the PC screen or something like that, right? That could also be like a more human-oriented interpretation of the story, right? So I would think about that. So what does technology has perished mean specifically, right? Because there's a lot of weight to that, and I really like what you're saying here. But I think we need to define what that exactly means and what your interpretation of it is, right? Because that is going to then lead to like, okay, that's going to mean that we need these assets, that the proportions are going to be this scale, and like all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I think that is honestly the core question that I want you to think about. And then, yeah, the second thing is like thinking about the proportions of things, the scale of things, right? That would be the second thing to get that more consistent. But that is going to flow down from the story. Yes, thank you. You're welcome. Lovely to see you start a new project here, Lily. I'm excited to follow it along. Are gold stars redeemable for extra whip questions? I don't know about that one. That feels risky. Let's see. We did have a lot of yapping in the channel. That's what they're there for. I love it. If I have time, I don't see why not. I do think they suggest to do multiple projects, but better something than nothing. Yeah. To add to the conversation here, if you want to submit anything for the rookies, it doesn't matter if it's just one thing, just post it. Post it. Fire it off and forget about it. Who knows what's going to come out of it? Just do it. Grab every opportunity by the horns, you know? Okay. Let's have a look at the next person. So we have Jack of Diamonds is going to be the next person. Jack is also starting on a new project. Fucking hell, we're on a roll here. Got some beautiful concepts. I don't know who these concepts are from. Did you mention that by any chance? Is there no shout out that I can give to the artist? No, unfortunately not. Apologies for that. But some really cool stuff happening here though. I like it. What is the thing that I can help you with? So let's see. The question is more of a general one. How would you approach a project like this? Should I, and this is specifically focusing on, should I stay faithful to the concept in order to preserve its appeal? Oh, sorry. Excuse me. To preserve its appeal and overall tone, even if that means sacrificing some realism, or would it be better to treat the concept as a loose foundation and build the assets and scenes based on the realistic architecture and functional principles? So I think you're asking a question that actually... oh, thank you. Thank you, Jack of Diamonds. It is Halgand Joris. Awesome. Let me actually quickly look that up. And we're going to give them a shout out as well. Let's see. So there we go. If you want to check out their work, go check them out. What I was saying, I think you're hinting, your question is actually hinting at like, do I want to take it a more realistic way or like stylistic way? That's the way that I'm taking it. And I think if you choose to go stylized, it opens more opportunities for one option. If you go more realistic, then I'm expecting the other thing, right? So I don't know if that was a thing that you were struggling with already, but that's what I would think about first. Do I want to do a more realistic spin, or do I want to stay true to the concept and kind of keep it more like stylized, you know? Just for the sake of reference, this is the concept that we're talking about as well. Let me just chuck that in here. That's the first thing that I would think of. Then when it comes to do I stay faithful to the concept? In a very general sense, I would stay faithful to the concept to where it makes sense for you. Because sometimes what I love to see is that you took a concept and then you were like, I love all this stuff, but I don't like this, so I'm going to change that. Oftentimes, what is actually pretty easy for something like this is this building is pretty generic, right? And that is oftentimes by design. Like you have a watermill, there's some flowers, but we don't really get like, okay, who's living here? What do they do, right? I think it could be more about the functionality of the building. There's a watermill here. Maybe there's like a mill inside. Maybe it's a bakery, that kind of thing, right? I think that could actually be more a meaningful addition to the concept, right? You're taking something and you're trying to turn it more into like a hero building or like an important location in the game, right? And then it would be cool to see like how you deal with that, right? Like, let's say we make this a bakery, for example. What elements do you then add to make it look like a bakery from the initial impression that I get from it, right? And that opens up more interesting things that you can start adding to it. We've not made any notes. Let me scribble down some stuff here. So that's the way that I would think about it, right? So the first thing is style. You have to decide, like, are you going to do like a realistic approach to this? Or are you going to go more stylized and maybe true to maybe true to the concept, right? Jack is saying, I want to stick more to the realistic side, maybe a bit of stylization, but mostly realistic. Okay. That is interesting. That opens a lot of opportunities. Just for the sake of helping you out with this, Try to define that by finding very accurate images of what you exactly mean, right? Because I know that this is very broad, like realistic and stylized, because you can do so much within those two styles, right? We need to go like a layer deeper and actually define what that means with visuals. So define that with visuals if you can, because that's going to be really, really useful for you. And those visuals can literally be like, oh, I love the thing that I get from like Overwatch, right? That is the style that I want to emulate. Cool. You can kind of do that. Games. Let's see. Do you think it's a case where it's better to move on and find a concept that's more compatible with a realistic environment approach before I invest too much time into it? No, I think you can put like a realistic spin on like a stylized concept, right? I think this is a good one where there is exaggeration happening, but I think if you were to render this in like a realistic way, I'm not going to be frowning upon like, oh, this doesn't really feel like super stylized, you know, or like it doesn't feel realistic at all. So I think you can turn something like this into something realistic still. Like even this, right? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I think that was it. That's all I had to add here. So I hope that was helpful, Jack. Thank you for asking the question. Cool. And good luck with the project. I'm keen to follow it along. Watermill gang, let's go. Let's see. What else here? They told me more projects the better in one submission for the rookies. Yeah, which is an interesting one, right? We talked about it yesterday as well, where it's again like the overall argument of quantity over quality is always like a weird one to me, right? There needs to be a balance, especially a balance, but like ideally way more towards the quality side when it comes to your submissions to the rookies. Yeah. So don't throw anything in there. That would be my suggestion. Make it look nice. Make it look consistent as best as you can, you know? It might even oh, Top G is saying, I mean, the past 2 years, who won had 2 environments. Interesting, right? Because I think there is a real art to showcasing like, hey, I only have these 2 things, and those things are literally the best thing that I can do. Rather than a person who has like, I don't know, 10 different things, and you can really see a clear transition to like when they got good, right? I think the same kind of rule, I mean, you've heard me say this like 1,000 times before for portfolio reviews, right? Same thing applies there. Only show your best work. Because as soon as I see something that is old, you basically give me an excuse to not like the work or like to not like the portfolio, right? And you want to remove that uncertainty and doubt as much as you can. Same thing applies to the rookies as well. So put your best foot forward, be critical. And if that means that you have like 5 really good things that you've done like recently that are showcasing the best side, post 5. If that means that you have to post 1, post 1. Jonas Schnecke is next. You will probably have to help me out again with the with the conversion. Oh no, Jonas. Yeah. There you are. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at your workload, Jonas. Cool. So your question was, my current goal is to finish the first texture pass soon. And thank you to the feedback on the floor. It's looking a lot better now. Nice. Love to hear it. Would love to get some feedback on the textures that are currently there now to know which of them need more attention, except for the wood panels. Thanks in advance. Yeah. So I think that your individual textures just the base materials, right? The tarp looks great. The tires look great. The floor is looking great. I love what you did to it. The barrels are looking great. The issue is that I want to see them being integrated in the environment way better. I think that's the next step you really need to look at. I was going to mention it last week, but I didn't know if that was like a style thing or something that you wanted to go for. So I'm going to mention it anyway. But like I said, like the individual textures look amazing. But how do we push the cohesion to where it makes sense for the scene, right? Because this feels like a scene that is like partially abandoned and there's like a lot of just random stuff going on, right? Which means that there's going to be like a lot of just random dirt and random things like collecting, and you know, people are going to step on this, which is then going to make this dirty, and that dirt is kind of going to collect like on the bottom side of the tarp. Same thing here, dirt is going to be collecting around this side because no one's going to be bothered to clean in between those two things. And right, you can start to look at some of these elements and start building like transitions between the two. And whenever let's say you add like a bunch of pebbles here, right? Let's say you add like a bunch of pebbles and maybe there's like a decal with like, I don't know, some like smearing on the floor. Let's imagine that that's smearing, you know? Then I also want to see some transition when it comes to the bottom of the tire too. Because this is really what creates cohesion, right? We are doing a pass on both objects. Excuse me. And both of those objects together, they now have a transition going from the tire to the floor and vice versa. And that transition is blending everything together. You'll see this in games a lot. Walk to any building that's on the floor, you're gonna see that transition where like some of the plaster is broken at the bottom and some of the dirt is more is different close to like the edge of something, right? This can be applied to the whole environment, right? Because I got like a random picture here. I tried to find a good one. Time pressure was really kicking my ass on this. But you can tell that like this is an old piece of tarp that has like a dirty tire on it, you know? That's the sort of like connection that I kind of want to see. Where you see the dirt on the floor and then it creates not only with like these small pebbles, which are good, I also then want to see like a texture transition between certain areas too. So yeah, that's the first thing. So blending between the floor and the assets, and then also positional blending, which is a question mark for what the hell did I even mean with this myself. I'm gonna take a quick stab at it. Is that is probably what I meant with this, right? Where you have like a natural position like this, you're gonna expect a lot of dirt because everyone's just walking past and like kicking a bunch of stuff in here. So you're gonna see a lot of blending happening between these two surfaces, you know? Because it's just... Okay, here's maybe another thing to look at. People are gonna be walking here, right? Because you're indicating this with the footsteps as well. So imagine that you're walking here, and imagine that with every step that you take, you're kicking dirt out of the way of like the most common paths of travel, right? So you're gonna have in any environment, and this is very defined in like, let's say a forest path, right? Where you have the dirt path in the middle, and then the rest is kind of like grass, kind of like going to like thicker bushes and all that kind of stuff. We do this with like interior environments too, just in a more subtle way, right? That's what I'm trying to do here. Because this is all stuff that like got kicked to the side by people just walking in this path. Right? And try to imagine where a person would walk. And then, yeah, think about where it makes sense for dirt to be collecting. Cool. Yeah, but that stuff is going to be really helpful, I think. Because that is going to increase the realism, it's going to blend everything nicely together. And especially because you have some of this already happening on the wall. And I think this stuff is starting to look really, really good. If that is the sort of texturing style you're going for, I'm expecting this sort of detail or blending in the rest of the environment as well. Right? So that would be like the main thing that I would say. Look at blending and try to blend all the different areas together. Cool. Thank you, Jonas. Appreciate it. Abu in the chat. I'm assuming that's going to be Abu. Is that right? We'll go crazy with with decals. Nice. Hello, yes. Yeah, there we go. Nice. For you, we're talking about material planning, right? First of all, I have not seen your name. Yeah, welcome to the community. Happy to have you. Okay, we are talking about texture planning with you. Okay, very, very quick couple things. I do like what you're doing here, right? You're trying to come up with a logical way of, hey, I can turn everything that I see into a texture atlas, right? Which does make sense to a certain degree. The major downside is that this workflow is all purpose built for this specific building, right? I think technically you could make the argument that you can make this building and then still use like the same texture maps. However, in games we focus more on flexibility. So flexibility and reusability. What that means is, let's say you have a plaster material. If I'm going to use a plaster material somewhere else in the scene that is not attached to this building, that means that I'm also pulling in like all this other stuff that I don't need into memory, right? Because let's say you build, I don't know, you build like a wall. It doesn't have a roof or anything like that, no windows. Let's say you build a plaster wall. It's going to be pulling in this entire texture, which now holds like stuff that you're not going to use. So it's a long way of saying to wherever you have big surfaces, have them as like separate titleables. Have them as separate titleables. So separate titleable would be the plaster, right? So let's do green. Green is titleables. So you have the big plaster, you have like the rooftop as well. You know, like the entirety of the roof can just be like one titleable. I'm not seeing like any dramatic shifts on like the silhouette and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so we can just make it like one titleable. Let's see, any other opportunities for titleables? I am not sure what's happening on the corner here for this building because of your overpaint, right? So I'm just going to assume that that is also just going to be plaster. Yeah, it looks like that's going to be plaster. That's fine. The wood is going to be a titleable. And then also, if you want to do like an interior, right? Like all the interior flooring, that's also going to be titleables. Cool. So we have titleables. So the bulky stuff is already out of the way. Next thing, how do we then add like all these wooden elements, right? There's a couple of ways. When you have like all these like unique wooden frames and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to make this super easy. This is probably going to be the most straightforward way. You just make that into a texture atlas instead. That means that every wooden element that looks like a little bit unique, the window, the door, that can be titleable as well. Yeah. Okay, so the window, the door. The window, the door, let's see. And then some additional wooden elements, for example, these slats. Maybe the top slat here. Maybe this like triangular element. The rest of it can just be titleables again, right? So this stuff, that's titleable again. Titleable again. That can be done there. And then if you want to make your titleables look better, you just use something like POM or something like that. Yeah, so that's where you create like a texture atlas, which is basically just going to be like all the all the architectural elements, windows, doors, anything like that, it's going to be one texture atlas. And then, oh, probably these guys too, right? So like the little supports, and then maybe like the beams here as well. I would kind of add them to like one texture atlas. And now you end up with, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 tidables, roughly, right? I don't know what you have planned for the interior. 4 tidables, and then one texture atlas, right? That just contains like all the more unique elements. And then you still have some room left, right? If you're like, oh, my atlas is full and I need to add some other elements, you can still add it if you wanted to. But that's the way that I would break things down. Yeah, you could have like wood decals. Make those decals in like a separate thing, right? So that could be like lasting, where you have like your decal sheet. Just like one decal sheet with like all the decals that you need. Yeah, that's the way that I would do it. Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Abu. Appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing this come together. Let's move on to the next person. Thank you. No worries. Happy to help. And again, welcome to the community. Love it to have you. Maddie is next. I just had a peek at the time, and God, I actually said to myself before the stream today, like, I'm gonna do less rambling today. And then we did like an hour and 15 minutes of just rambling. Okay, Maddie. Let's have a look. Where are you? Sorry, I forgot to mention, are the texture sets okay for what they are, and should I make any improvements of them? So let's see. We have diffuse, normal, and ambient for the desk itself. Typically uses a 4K texture, but the above screenshots show the desk in 8K. Ooh, that's chunky. 8K? What kind of texel density are you going for here? That would be just a random question. The props are 1 shared UV with 2K texture map. Right. So we have the props on the left and then the desk on the right. Yeah, let's see. Wanted to do the 8K as an experiment earlier. I'm not actually using 8K. Okay. That's good. So we're dealing with 4K and 2K then, right? Cool. Let's see. Are they looking okay? I mean, in general, they kind of look okay, right? It's somewhat annoying that we can't see the roughness map, because that's where you get a lot of the information from. Let's see. The only thing, there's a couple of things that I was thinking about before the stream. It's like you have these like weird areas here where I don't know, is it actual information? It looks like we're in between stuff, so it might not matter, but those would be like worth looking into. And I was also surprised, and maybe that's just like the resolution and the scale of the textures, is that there's not a lot of information in the normal map. Interestingly enough. And I think that's because most of it is paper. But I think even with paper, you can add like a little bit of like a crumpling effect, you know? To kind of have that effect. Yeah. So that's the main thing that was like initially where I was like, Because I think in general, your paper is quite noisy, right? Well, it's actually not too bad, actually. Now that I look at it again. But if you just have like some waviness or some crumpliness to kind of add like an additional, like a slight additional layering to it, I think that could help a lot. But yeah, in general, they are okay though. Like texture sets are looking good. I did it before I changed my UV wrap just to see how my draws looked. Okay. Cool. What is that stuff? Is that like the back of the book? No, we can't really see the books anyway, so. Yeah. Yeah. I think they look okay. There's nothing really glaring that I want to say. Apart from the thing where I was interested in seeing where like the emptiness of the normal would be. But yeah. We are book is saying could also just make the mesh shape a bit more interesting to add to those folds and bending, etc. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we talked about that like a week ago or maybe 2 weeks or something. I don't know. That weirdness is stuff that's hidden. I think I'm gonna remove it anyway. Oh, if it's hidden, it doesn't matter, right? Like if it's just like in an empty space between UVs, doesn't matter. Yeah, I agree. Still, yeah, making it like physically like come up a little bit, you know, like you're doing with the book as well, would still be nice. Because maybe I explained it wrong because you have like a little indentation here. I was talking about like literally having like you can even see this, right? Like with like modern paper, if you just leave it on the desk, you can still see that it's not just like super flat on the desk. It is still gonna be have like little air pockets and all that kind of stuff with it, right? So try to emulate some of that stuff. Especially for the detail shot. That could definitely help. But yeah. Otherwise, looking good, Maddie. Keep on trucking. Let's have a look. Who was next? Dale. Dale is next. I don't have you in the list, Dale. What is happening? Uh-oh. Did you forget to add the tag? Or were you just joining into the hype of like raising hands? That could also be a thing. Thanks, guys. No worries. No worries. Thank you, Maddie. I think Dale was just joining in on the fun, honestly. Okay, we're skipping Dale for now. Let's see. Moment is asking next. Cool. Awesome stuff with the scene. Let's have a look. Some final remarks, right? That's the thing that you were talking about. Let me see. Where is... There we go. Got it. I'm trying to close down the scene and wondering if anything still stands out that needs to be taken care of. I haven't adjusted the ivy texture, so it's less... I haven't adjusted the ivy texture, so it's less noisy, by the way. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I did have a look at this before the stream. One of the first things that I noticed was a lot of this stuff. It's weirdly floating. You're probably going to have to do some, like, I don't know, lumen trickery and, I don't know, maybe have contact shadows or whatever you need to do, but it feels like this stuff is just like floating in midair just because there's no contact shadow information there, which is annoying because I know that like trying to balance like lighting information is like pretty annoying sometimes. But yeah, that'll be a thing. And maybe same thing here. Right, it's kind of leaning into the same thing where I would probably expect like a little bit more shadow in between surfaces, especially this area here. Because it's like literally occluded by like a giant thing blocking it, right? So those are suffering from the same issues. Let's see. What else? I think if you're looking to close this down, I would really try and be very picky with certain elements that are like really easy to fix, right? And you just have to scrutinize things. For example, in the front of the frame where you have like this contrast going on, that is coming from the lighting, right? But I think it could be good to add like a little bit of breakup here that maybe then leads into this breakup here to kind of make it more interesting, because we are calling attention to it, right? Same with this pipe as well. I don't know why that stood out to me, but it feels basic compared to its surroundings, right? What it's surrounded by. Let's see. The ground also, because it's taken up such a big space, it feels really noisy. It's hard to read the individual textures, right? Because we're going from like a really noisy moss to like really noisy stones. And it's almost like I want the stones to be like clearly defined, then transition into noisy moss. I don't care at that point. And then you can have like your puddle of water, right? Which I do think is like really, really nice. But having some sort of transition where if you have a clean stones here, like not clean, right? But like easy to read stone texture. Let me actually write that down. And then we go into something that's like really noisy, right? Then I'm fine with it, because that's like a transition between like something that's easy to read between something that becomes harder to read, but we can kind of read it as moss. And then we have something that is like pretty clean again, but I would expect some areas of the rocks to kind of be, or the stones to kind of be pushing through it again, right? Because if this is just water on like something that is cobblestone, you're gonna see that in certain cases, like in between cobblestone, you're gonna see it, but then on actual cobblestone, it's not gonna be drowned out by water, right? So that's because it is taking up such a large space in the environment. That's an area where I would look at. Just really cleaning up like the textures here, making it easy to read, transition it into something noisy, and then introducing the stones in the second, in the pool as well. Or like in a puddle in front of the pool. Cool. And then I think where I would also spend a bit more time. Well, let me actually cut out a little statue. Just to be very precise, you know? I would probably think about the textures here as well and how to break them up even more, because the rest of the scene has like a lot of textural detail. It's a lot of textual detail, but it's almost making it feel again like this kind of texture is just like simple, right? So I would have a look into maybe introducing more plaster in this area so that you have like plaster buildup and then it's like exposed brick that is kind of doing the transition again. Maybe to kind of make this area more interesting. Yeah. Maybe, but just something to make this more, well, feel less basic, right? I was thinking of adding a gradient from the bottom. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's also fine. Like, as long as we get some breakup there, right? I think that's good. My go-to idea was plaster because you had it in the scene already. You kind of have the blend set up. If you wanna do like a gradient from the bottom, that's fine too. As long as we get some sort of breakup here, that's fine with me. And yeah, really think about like, you know, like areas like this, maybe like a little bit more ivy. It's details, right? Detail work. A little bit more ivy, a little bit more just like decals over here. And then in the far distance, yeah. Again, it's a lighting thing, right? But this feels like it's floating on the staircase. Maybe not having it there would be interesting. Or something to try out. I don't know. Trying to do something with like local lighting or something like that to kind of emphasize that there is shadow underneath it. Or adding more volumetric fog or like distance fog so that we see less of it, perhaps. I don't know. Something there with like the last arch that could be defined as well. So yeah, bunch of ideas. Those are the things that stood out to me. Yeah. Good stuff, man. By the way, do you think I should submit this to the rookies or skip this year? Like, just go ahead with the abandoned diner? That's up to you. Because I don't know, what was the deadline again? Like 11 days or something like that? If you can make that comfortably while adding like as much as you can to the scene still, right? That's up to you. If it is done, yeah, submit it. If it's not done, don't submit it. That's what it comes down to, really, right? Noted, thanks. No worries, no worries. Cool. And thank you for asking for feedback. Next up and last one in line, we got Owen. Hello, Owen. I have not had the time to prepare for you specifically, but let's have a look. Finished up the bakery scene, and I was wondering how everything looks. One last thing that I want to add, that's not there yet, is the personal touch you mentioned in the last feedback, like post-it notes, spill stains, decals, etc. Okay, cool. I mean, I think that comes down to like feedback that I said like last week and the week before, probably, right? Is that I don't really have like an issue with the individual textual quality and the asset quality, right? I think you've done a fantastic job on making it feel like a bakery. Like all the components are there. I like some of the additions that you've added too. But to me, that little personal touch is where it's going to make or break a scene, right? Because I think, again, you've done a fantastic job of like nailing all the individual elements, like all the individual assets are looking like really nice. Like I like the way that the textures read and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think you've done a fantastic job. Now it's just, yeah, adding that personal touch into it. So I think the stuff that you're doing is awesome, right? I mean, I don't know if I've been open about this before, but like, yeah, it is great stuff that you're doing. But that personal touch is really going to make it, right? So I think you're on a good track. And I'm really curious to see like how you're going to add that like final layer of just like personality in it. And I'm excited to see what that's going to mean. So weirdly, I don't really have like anything to say on this, you know, because it would just be like, yeah, add more personality into it. So I'm looking forward to seeing that all come in and to really put the polish into it. So yeah, looking forward to that, Owen. Great stuff. It feels weird. Like I don't really have any feedback, but you know, I'll give you a start. Here you go. Because it does look awesome. And then can't wait for personality. In my best doctor's writing that you can't read. There you go. Yeah, but good stuff, Owen. How many stars would he get if he adds the personal touch? I've been very selective with how I give stars, right? I think I've only given people 1 star at a maximum, one at a time. So yeah. I think there's like, it's capped. It's like very binary, my star system. Where's mine? I'll send you a GIF of a star. I'll try to find like the most fucked up GIF that I can send you that has a star in it. How does that sound? For context, for people that are just random, we have this thing going on where we try to send each other like the weirdest gifts that we can find, and we found some good ones. So I'll see if I can find like a star-based gift, you know. No. Oh yes. Oh yes. Cool. Thanks again, Owen. Thank you for posting your work. I think we have freedom now, right? We don't have any people in the chat. So again, if you are in the chat and you want to get your work seen first, feel free to raise your hand and you'll skip the queue. You don't have to wait until the end. Otherwise, I'm just going and blasting through like what I can tell here. First of all, Sadvik. Sadvik is coming in with a new project as well. We've got a bunch of really cool new projects. Awesome to see people. Sadvik is making a Viking longhouse. And I think the question was just on feedback, on shape language, the scale and the proportions and all that kind of stuff, right? Basically the blockout stage. What I would say, the main thing that I would say is I think the scale is okay, right? I think the scale is good. You're measuring it with like a bunch of mannequins, which always looks like really creepy, but I love it. So keep doing that. I think that's good. The main thing that I would say is just try to add more curves or a more dynamic silhouette to things, right? Because right now we just have like a straight roof, which is not too interesting. And then we have like a little bit of a curve going on here, but it feels like it's very tame, you know? It's a very subtle curve. So I would look at doing something like this where the front of the house is actually coming out and then kind of thing is like sticking out, right? Something like this, it makes the building feel more expressive, right? And then you can kind of tie in like a lot of the other elements. Because sometimes what I like is like the continuation of curves, right? So if you have these curves, like these wooden beams that are sticking out of the building, it would make sense for that curve to kind of keep continuing rather than just being like, whoop, and then just straight, you know? Good inspiration for these roofs are Norwegian's Stavkirke. I pronounce it in like a German way. Or as close to German that I can get, I guess. Oh my god, I'm gonna butcher this so bad. Stavkirke. I'll write it down. So that would be something to look up. Ta-da! That was pretty close. Hey, let's go. Let's go. I'll take it. So yeah, but overall, Savik, I like the block out. Really good job. All the elements are there. I think the overall look and feel and just like the scale of it feels really well done already, right? Which is a good sign. One thing that I always look for is also you have like the first entrance. This is a very subtle thing, but I think you might have done that. It's like if you have the height of your first floor is always going to be the highest compared to the other floors on top of it. Well, saying that might just be modern construction, so I might be wrong here. But one rough measure that I use is just like putting a guy on like each floor and then seeing if all the elements still make sense, right? Because you could almost see like, okay, there's a floor here, the floor has a certain thickness. And does that like match up with like if you then extrapolate this going all the way around, right? Because then you can see like, oh, this person can actually walk here and then like look out this window, right? So that continuation going all the way around, something that's also like really recognizable. You've done a good job so far. So awesome stuff. And thank you for the suggestion, Conceptual Vision. I like that. Harry is working on this thing, this military outpost now. And the question is simple. Harry has made a bunch of improvements on the assets. And the question is it visible? Is it visible that this is like a military outpost? And this might give away that it might not be a good sign. But I went back to a week ago and looked at the comparison. And I think this is an interesting one to compare, right? I tend to do this with a lot of my own work as well, where I will see what I did change and how big of an impact it made. And I think what you've done was very subtle. And what I want you to do is I want you to be more upfront about it, right? Like we talked about it last week, right? Like think about how you can change the silhouette of certain elements. So what I was trying to deliberately do is I would try to find areas where I can have like a stronger silhouette that like the read of that initial silhouette reads way better already, right? Because I think in terms of what you need to focus on, it is stuff along these regions, right? Where you have some silhouette going on. Those are going to be like big impact areas, right? Because an area like this down here, it is still good that you added like ammo boxes and all that kind of stuff here, right? And we'll talk about that more in a second. But that is going to be it's almost going to be invisible compared to the stuff that's happening up top, right? So try to be aware of that and try to focus more on the silhouette rather than things that are happening inside of existing shapes, if that makes sense. So focus on silhouette. Stranger is saying the right side shape reads too boxy where the escape ladders are. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, it is very boxy. And it's also a thing where, okay, they have scaffolding going on. And this might be like a logical way of approaching this, right? If you have the scaffolding going on, and it's very elaborate scaffolding, right? This is not like a thing that you set up really quickly. Why is it there? Right? Like, why is that scaffolding there? Because if it's just to get like upstairs, then probably like, I don't know, a makeshift ladder or something like that would probably make more sense, right? So it almost feels like, okay, this is to get up in like a very constructed manner. But then there's nothing to do on top of the building, right? So I would then, I don't know, we talked about this like a watchtower or sandbags constructions or something that hints at like, oh, this is like an actual fortified base that has like construction going on. And maybe, oh, this could be a cool thing. Like maybe like a mini like radio tower, you know, hinting at like communication happening up here too. Because then we add some infrastructure to kind of make sense of like why they need such a solid thing, such a solid scaffolding to get up there, right? That would make sense. And it's a lookout point, so there's going to be like fortifications and all that kind of stuff. That's what I'm assuming. But then, yeah, you can see that I'm thinking about things like in a very logic way, right? Like there's a stair here, why? There's a floodlight on the left, why? Right? Like why is there a floodlight here? Can we then indicate that this is like a gate that opens frequently in some point? If so, do they then have like a guard post set up here? So that like a person can literally just like sit in this guard post and kind of keep watch. Maybe there's like, I don't know, like a little deck chair or something like that in here, right? Something like that. Just a thing that comes to mind like immediately, right? But it's like, okay, we have like the light here, which is hinting at like, oh, they need to have light here is that light functional? Then it's like, okay, if that light is functional, then that he means that there's going to be like, I don't know, like a sliding door, like, I don't know, something happening here, right? And then like a guard post. So you can see that like, okay, why is this light here? Leads to, in my thinking, leads to, okay, so that means that this door is openable. That's like a second effect. Which then probably means that that door is probably heavily guarded because that is an intake point. Right? This is where they're moving in goods or something like that. So that means that there's going to be, I don't know, let's say fortifications and things blocking you from like just like rolling into the compound, right? So there's like concrete blocks or something like that. I don't know. You can look into all that stuff, right? But that's the sort of logic that I try to explain, like use in my own work as well. Let's see. We are book is saying would be curious to see what references were used. Military bases in general could be good to know what kind of stuff they keep around. Yeah. Military vehicle is usually a big giveaway at bases. That is true. It might also increase the scope though. Yes, that is also true. You could potentially do it in like a very smart way where this would actually be a case where if you find like a good military vehicle that you can get for free or like cheap, I would honestly consider like having like almost like a truck backed up here. You know, with like just like the fabric canvas kind of like cloth behind it. And then you can kind of see like, oh, the military boxes, they are unloading them currently, and that's where they're storing them. So it's like hinting at like a sequence of events with just like a military truck. So you're adding something that's like really recognizable. And you're also embedding that in the logic of just like the logistics of this place, right? Like, how does that work? So yeah. But yeah, I would always focus on silhouette changes first, make it really recognizable, and then see. Maybe you might have to like move this building down by like a floor to then give you more room to then build stuff onto the roof, right? Honestly, that would solve the storytelling issue. Yeah. Yeah, it could do, right? It's one of the things that we can add, right? Like if you already have something, because this is the thing that I mentioned like last week as well, right? Whenever you want to make something really recognizable as like in a location, you almost have to go towards exactly like you said, right? Look at references, look at like 10 different references. If a truck is always going to be there, a truck is a good candidate for having that in your scene, right? Because it is so recognizable that like whoever knows about the military base is probably going to think about a truck, barracks, sandbags, a truck, barracks, sandbags, communication tower, maybe. But you can see, right? Like even in that list, a flag is also a good one actually. You can actually see that there is this list that you can literally go to of like, oh, if I were to distill down any location, it is probably going to be like 5 things. And then it's just your job to like, let's say if it is a flag, right? Instead of the communication tower up top, that would be a great replacement, honestly. Ditch the communication tower, put a flag in place. Because a flag also can hint at, you know, it has like a very different connotation if it is an American flag, or if it is like some other flag of like a new military organization or something like that, right? There's a lot of connotations and a lot of hints. Why? Oh my god. YouTube needs to really figure this shit out with like the auto translate stuff. In my YouTube chat, when you said America, it literally translated it to pepper. Huh? Anyway. Like a convention or cliche. Not sure what you mean by that, Marius. Or do you mean like the actual the act of distilling something into like its core recognizable features, right? Like the cliche things that you can go to. But yeah. So I would say that you have made improvements, but they were very subtle improvements, right? I want to see the big improvements first, and then the stuff that you've done is actually really good, but it's a bit more down the line, I would say. Cool. Thank you, Harry. Good stuff. Good stuff. Next up, we go to Teapot. Oh, sorry, Mike. You're saying storage signs. Yeah, potentially. That's also like down in the hierarchy of stuff to add. That is also a good thing, right? I was gonna say with the military boxes, right? We talked about this last week as well. I think if you want to signify that something belongs to a military organization, they are usually gonna be way more organized, which means that those military crates, they are gonna be stacked in neat piles and not just randomly thrown, right? Because any military organization takes a lot of pride into like how clean they are, or like perceptibly clean they are and organized, and that has a lot to do with it, right? If you have like a guerrilla camp in the middle of the forest, you can expect a lot of shit to just be strewn around, right? But from like a military force, the average perception is that they're super organized, which means that you can't really have like a lot of chaos within the camp, unless they are under like direct fire or something like that, right? But yeah, slight side tangent. But yeah, your suggestion, Mike, of the storage signs could actually go into that, right? Like it's hinting at some sort of like organized structure where this way to the HQ, this way to storage, like all that kind of stuff going on. Yeah. Teapot, next in line, talking about the story. Is the story better visible? I think it is way better. You've done a good job of incorporating some of the elements that we talked about, right? And like trying to make it more clear. You got the shadow going on here, which is like pretty eerie, very interesting. I would say we've got the story elements in a good place. What I would focus on now is how do we then highlight them better, right? I would actually think to kill this light completely and to focus more on the actual warm light coming from the campfire. So we're getting less intensity from the light up top, but we're getting more of a general kind of fill light. And then we have a sliver of light coming from the little basement that they just retreated into, right? Very subtle, but somewhat noticeable if you're paying attention, right? Because what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to shift the focal point from the light that's at the ceiling, because it is the brightest point. So of course it's going to draw your attention towards more lower down. But currently, if we can't really draw your attention here because this light is so strong. So we need to balance the lighting in terms of focusing your attention somewhere else, right? So that's why I think if we make the whole scene kind of like just lower down and moody, we can then be more subtle with pointing you towards like the hole that he used to escape, right? So that's the way that I would kind of play things. It's almost like it's going to be very stereotypical, but if you have like your Christmas evening sitting by the firelight moments, you know, you have like all the Christmas, all the lighting coming from the fireplace. That's almost something that I'm imagining without any of the coziness. Let's see. Christmas evening lighting fireplace. Let's see if we can find a good one. Oh, a bunch of AI stuff too. Great. Okay. We're just going to skip it. I mean, I hope you get what I mean, right? Very subtle with the lighting so that we can highlight the very subtle thing that's happening in our scene as well. And I think that's the way that I want to play it with like this part of the scene. Then the second part of the scene where you literally have like a perpetrator like forcing a door, maybe it could be interesting to kind of play with that element of, hey, they just literally force the door, so we kind of see like the door like here, like off its hinges or something like that. Maybe, right? But yeah, something like that could potentially be interesting to look at, so that we kind of see a door that is barged open and then you see the shadow in the hallway. Also to make your life a little bit easier, you could potentially get rid of like the window completely and just give you like a nice clean wall space to kind of cast a shadow on. I think that's going to be more effective than to have a window there as well. Just a slight thing, but yeah, can definitely help a lot. Cool. Thank you, Teapots. Thank you. Next one up, we got Rat. Rat is at it again. Let's see. You're working on this old church and you're asking 2 questions, which is not allowed. Back to the class. Like, back to the class, you're grounded. We're not having 2 questions in Whip Wednesday. We're not doing that anymore. How dare you? But they kind of go into the same direction anyway. So we're gonna address them. We're gonna address them in one answer. Because the answer basically comes down to like, hey, I'm trying to translate a block out into a modular kit, and would you make this into a modular kit anyway? And I'm gonna say no need for the modules. I think with something like this, if you're focusing on one building and you literally have like a bunch of like unique elements with like broken tiles and broken rooftops and all that kind of stuff, I would rather you lean into the destruction by making it more unique than try to distill it into like a modular kit, honestly. Oh, and also this brings up a good question in the chat before. McFall is saying, did I get first? Yeah. You're always first in my heart, McFall. Anyway, let's continue on. So what I was saying here is, if you're doing something like this, it is probably better to lean into the individual destruction, right? And that means that we are gonna, instead of making it into like individual modules, I want you to think about like, okay, what elements do I need to create to be able to replicate all the things that I need for this building, right? So here's a quick overview of what that means. At the edge of the silhouettes, you want individual roof tiles. For the core of the building, you want a tileable, right? They can use the same meshes in the sense of like, you can use individual tiles to then build a tileable with down the line, right? Which is a smart way. But that means that, okay, I can already make all the roofs, and wherever you have a destroyed element, you can just add individual roof tiles wherever you need. And then the rest of it is just literally going to be a tileable that you kind of cut a hole in, you know? You just literally cut around the pattern of the tileable, and then wherever the pattern stops, you just fill the gap with like individual tiles to kind of make it look really nice. Same thing here. Very flexible way of working. And that's also the way that I would do the stones. So wherever you have stones on the sides, just make that into like individual stones. The middle, make that with tileable textures. So you're going to need a stone tileable. You're going to need a plaster tileable. That's it. You can now make this entire building apart from the architectural elements. These architectural elements, you could kind of treat them as like unique potentially, because this kind of stone is going to be very different to any of the other stone that you're using. So maybe make like a trim for the architectural elements, maybe. But I think it could also be good to just have them as like individual meshes and then just make an atlas out of them. So these guys, they're all just like a little atlas. Or just like unique meshes that are just sharing the same texture space. That's the way that I would play it. And now the focus is actually on like replicating the building itself, while not turning it into a Lego brick set. You know, we're just like tileable modular pieces slapped together, which oftentimes happens with a modular kit. So focus on the uniqueness and make this stuff stand out. Right. Next up, we got Mikval. Let's have a look. What were you asking for? Oh, I have a choice. We have a choice. I didn't realize that we had a choice. Let me grab the other one. Where is it? There we go. Okay, so we're gonna have a vote. So let's set this up to do a vote with 2 choices. I'm gonna bring them up on screen now so we can have a look. And you have the benefit of just seeing it from a distance, because I was actually going to be to your benefit here. So we're going with A or we're going with B. Feel free to cast your vote. Let me add the B here. A or B? What do you all think? Feel free to slap your vote in the chat. Be curious to hear what people think. B, B, B. Cool. Got 3 votes for B. 4 votes. Let's go. Da, da, da. B. Love it. We're getting some variation in the B's. Okay, five votes for B. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think we're getting some additional contrast, some additional volume. I also like the lighting coming in. Yeah, I do like it. I do like it. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I think to me, this is more on the subtle side, I would say. If we compare the two, it feels like the one on the left is more on the cold color spectrum, right? Is this where you tell us that A is the latest version? No. There's no shenanigans going on here. What I was saying though, like the colors on the one on the left feels like it's more on like one side of the spectrum, right? Like more in the cold regions, where we're getting like a little bit more contrast on the right. Feels more like a full image, right? McFall is saying, nice, it was worth playing around with this some more. Yeah, it's definitely worth playing around, because this stuff, you know, I try to do my best in giving you advice, but a lot of the stuff that I even on my personal work, I still struggle with like lighting. In a way that it just takes a lot of time to really tinker with stuff, right? Really tinker and play around and try to get like specific angles and all that kind of stuff. It takes time. So I would say if there was one suggestion to your point, it's just never stop playing around, right? Because you never know. Like what I usually do in the evenings where I'm like, okay, my brain is dead. Like I can't really be doing like any productive work on my project anymore. That's when I'll just like play around with the lighting. Just, I don't know, try different presets, like rotate the sun. And then if nothing works, I just close it without saving it and I'll just do the thing tomorrow, you know? But sometimes you have this like happy accidents where it's like, oh, I didn't try this before. I kind of like this. And then you can either like, sometimes what I do is I take a screenshot. I go back to the lighting that I've had for the longest time, or I'll save it as like a little preset or something like that. But that means that the next day, if I still like it, I have a screenshot of it and I can replicate it, or I can go back to my lighting condition. Because sometimes in the evening, you don't want to trust yourself too much, you know? Because sometimes you might be like, oh, this looks good with your sleepy eyes. You wake up the next day and it's like, what the fuck have I done? You don't want to be doing that to yourself either. Cool. Yeah, good stuff, MacFal. Thank you for allowing us to vote. That's always fun. A little bit of engagement there. Love it. Yeah, but good stuff though. Still chipping away at some of the props, but they aren't in the scene at the moment, but will be next week. Trust. Okay. So next week, we're going to be looking at your props. That's what I'm hearing, right? And Conceptual Vision is also saying lowering the camera a tad, maybe? Yeah, maybe. That's a good suggestion for MacFal. Maybe playing around with that too. You never know. Scapel. Last 3 for today. Control-inspired environment. Do the changes improve the overall look of the environment, or is there anything you think I should focus on next? I visually separated the environment in 2 zones, blue and red. Added some new geometry to the 3 new pillars. Improved a few materials, added new props, and reworked the lighting across the entire scene. Nice, dude. You're adding a lot of improvements to the thing, to the scene. But I think they're doing fantastic, man. The initial reaction to the God Rays, maybe that's a bit strong, you know. So maybe there's a couple of ways that we can solve that, right? I would probably use like wider God Rays and maybe add like 2 additional ones next to it, so that you can kind of have the idea that it's not just like a single point light, but that it's like natural light just coming in from like natural elements to the ceiling, right? So that could work, or you just have to turn this one down and be like more subtle with it, because it is, especially in this shot, it's like really sticking out, right? So yeah, that was the initial reaction there. But the rest of it is looking quite nice, though. I like it. Conceptual Vision is saying, was this based on Control? Looks really at home in that world. Yeah. This is a Control-inspired environment, so very much at home in that world. And I think they did a fantastic job on like replicating all the elements, right? Really good job. Really good job. Yeah, cool stuff. Yeah, there's honestly nothing really that's like glaringly like throwing me off at this point. So I will just say, good job, man. Good job. Have a star. Here you go. Looking awesome. Great stuff, Scapel. Ilya is next. Ilya is asking for, how can I improve my close-ups? Dang it, I didn't grab your close-ups. I should have read before I dragged your stuff in. Let's have a look. I think I already know what I'm gonna say. Well, let's have a look. Okay, close-up time. Yeah. So here's the issue with close-ups, right? Well, it's not an issue with close-ups. It's the issue of the quality bar that you're demanding when you say you're going to do close-ups, right? Because from a distance, the overall scene kind of takes away the ability to scrutinize the smaller details, right? But now, if I'm going to be looking at your smaller details up close, they're really standing out a lot, right? Which means that usually what this comes down to is close-ups, they require more geometry, right? Because you can see faceting on some of the assets from up close, right? Or some of it just feels like pretty basic. What this also demands of you is just like really good attention to textures and yeah, blending of different areas, right? We can see that here. This tile being broken by just slapping on what I assume to be like a decal or something like that just doesn't hold up in close-ups, right? And that's the annoying thing when you do in a close-up. You're now telling me like, oh, I think this is good enough for a close-up shot, so feel free to scrutinize it from this up close, right? Which then, yeah, it becomes really difficult, right? Because yeah, we can see stuff like this happening. This is the geometry that I mentioned, right? It's like you have like a weird curve going on that is just like a little bit all over the place. That will also be scrutinized in like close-up shots too. Yeah, but I think especially in your case, it's going to come down to a lot of texture work, right? If you really want to take that to the next level and you want to have these close-ups, I am expecting more details in the individual textures, right? Then I'm also expecting to see like a little bit of dirt blending here, a little bit of, you know, like dirt on the bottom of the pot, and so on and so forth, right? Like then it is really about like scrutinizing, okay, what does an actual abandoned apartment look like and how can I get closer to trying to replicate those elements? Because yeah, also this, you know, again, it's just because it's a close-up, right? The texturing feels weird. It almost feels like it's trying to be stylized. It's almost trying to be like painterly, but obviously looking at the next thing next to it, it's more realistic. So yeah, a couple of points there, but think about the broad aspects that we talked about, right? Think about the you really scrutinize the textures that you've set up, right? Again, look at real life ref, look at what a wooden cabinet is made out of, and really try to replicate those things, right? I think, and I think I do want to also bring up the other option here. You have grown a lot during this project already, right? I don't know your previous projects and all that kind of stuff, right? But if I were to take a guess, is that this is a project that really pushed your boundaries, right? In the best way possible. And I think at a certain point, it's also fine to just say like, hey, look, I've learned so much. I'll keep the detail shots now if you want to, right? You can also remove them. That's up to you. But maybe it's time to just say like, okay, I can keep tinkering and I can keep improving. But at a certain point, you might also just need to call it done and then move on to the next thing where you can then improve on a very specific thing again, right? Again, that is, I'm making a lot of assumptions when I say that. So try to do a fair skill judgment by yourself and see how much you still want to push this environment based on what you've already learned during the production of this environment. Because I know you've done a ton and it shows. Saying it looks like it's a slope blur slapped on at the end. Yeah, exactly. And I think the easier option here is just don't show close-ups. I think the distance shot holds up quite well. Just have that for now. And then if you want to showcase attention to detail, do it with that in mind from the beginning and really, really try to nail like the texturing. Right, Ilya? But good stuff though, you know? Take the wins and really do really look at it as, okay, what do I still want to learn? And then try to build your next project around that, but like make it small, you know? If it's a texturing thing, literally go grab like Meet Math or something like that from like the Substance Designer Challenge that they do. Yeah, Raj is saying the same thing. Like, you could make the new piece about like close-up details and texturing focused. 100%, right? Like, and that would be my recommendation. Like, figure out a thing that you want to make, and then try to design a project around that, right? Because that allows you to be focused, make it small, make it like a couple of week thing, like 2 to 3 weeks, and really focus on that one thing that you want to learn. And then go to the next thing, right? Cool. Thank you, Ilya. But yeah, great stuff though. Great progress. I love seeing it come together. And I'll see what you get up to for the next week. Jinx. Ah shit, I can't say anything anymore. Dang it. Last person for today. Hello, Mana. Mana is saying, hello, Tim. I'm working on my trim sheet and I'm taking a mesh-based approach where I have different kinds of wood grain in my trim and I simply unwrap my trims onto it and afterwards add all the edge details using RGB masks. Okay. Is this an okay approach on... And how much detail would my trim need in actual geometry in this case? The wall panels, the arch, and the crown molding are all using the trim sheet. Wait, let me read that again. So, I'm taking a mesh-based approach where I have different kind of wood grain in my trim, and I simply unwrap my trim onto it, and afterwards add all the edge details using an RGB mask. So am I just understanding, like you're not even using a trim in that case, you're just using a tileable texture that just has wood grain on it? I guess you just have like a couple of regions with different pieces of wood grain, but you're not really using it as a trim sheet at this point, right? Because the purpose of a trim sheet, if we're talking about a classical trim sheet, is it has normal map information to at least give you the options to like have like normal information to mimic bevels, right? But I don't know if you are doing that here, because if you're only relying on geometry, that means that if you're making like intricate wood paneling and this all needs to be beveled, you're adding a lot of geometry all of a sudden. Which is not that great. So we would then need to think... yeah, we would then need to think about an approach where... I mean, this is gonna... I was thinking about Palm or something like that, or like Nanite, but those are all gonna complicate things, right? So I would say that the main recommendation that I have is if you are thinking about adding all the details with geometry, that is going to be very costly in geometry. I would still want you to do... I would still want you to do a trim sheet with like normal information like added into it. That's the way that I would do it. So more traditional trim sheet, I would say. Yeah, because you're saying you have different kind of wood grain in my trim, and I simply unwrap my trim onto it, and afterwards add all the edge details. Because I'm gonna take it one step further, right? Like if you want to have different types of wood grain, then you only need like one tileable really, and then make it look different in the engine with just like color adjustments and normal adjustments and all that kind of stuff, right? because that would be like the most optimal solution, that we only have like one wood texture and it's literally used on everything else, and the variation that we get actually comes from like RGB masking or something like that, right? But yeah, it also brings up the question. It is not a question that I want you to think about, right? If you are going to use like an RGB mask, then that also brings up the question on how are you actually creating these meshes? Because if they are going to be, can I actually spot like a seam? I think that's a seam here, right? Because for example, if this entire wall, right, is one big mesh, it probably isn't. It's broken down into modules, right? Which then means that, okay, now you have like an RGB mask. Are you then going to create like different RGB masks for different modules, or multiple RGB masks for the same module? And the system quickly spirals out of control, right? So yeah, I want you to think about that. If you're gonna use the trim sheet, I would still have the normal map information embedded into it, though. Like just having basically what equates to be a tileable is putting too much of a burden on geometry. So yeah, that's what I would say. There was some context missing here, though. I don't know what your modules look like. I don't know what your geometry looks like. So I had to make some assumptions. So if you want to share that with me next time, I think that could be really helpful, that additional context, right? But a couple notes that I'll just note down is, number one was thinking about like too much geometry. Question mark, right? I'll add question marks to all this stuff. Use trim sheet normals instead. And then you can still figure out a way to work with like RGB masking and all that kind of stuff on top of it, right? I think that is fine. There is like solutions that kind of work. But I think relying too much on geometry is not going to work for something like this. Or it's not going to look good. It doesn't feel like it's a proper workflow to be doing this with. So yeah, use your trim sheet textures that has like normal information built into it. The second thing was just like, how are you applying your RGB masks, right? That is an important question as well. Because, so a quick recap there. If you have modules, right? Let's say this is a quarter module, this is like a single module, then if these are going to use like the same, like let's say RGB mask, let's say like RGB texture 1, right? That means that if you're going to have like details here, the details are going to be the same here, right? It's going to be repeatable. That's not going to look good. So how do we then break that up, right? You have a couple of choices here. You could go with like, oh, we can actually create like multiple RGB masks. Or you can have things in the shader where you have like your RGB mask and then you like tweak parameters in the shader to make it more or less affect the same thing, but it's still going to use the same underlying logic, right? The same underlying mask. You're just tweaking the intensity and the contrast a little bit to hopefully make it look different enough. Or you would need to do something where you're really clever with the amount of modules, right? So let's say you have a module here with 2 slats. You have a module that is like, I don't know, 8 slats. Make like 2 or 3 variations and tweak them. Yeah, but that feels like, I don't know. That feels like such a weird setup to have. That doesn't feel like... It's definitely doable, right? It is definitely doable, and that would make the most sense. But it feels, I don't know, there's something weird about it. It doesn't feel like it's efficient and scalable. Yeah, decals for sure. She can use decals, and she can even use like vertex paint on top of it too, right? Yeah, too costly for what it is to do, right? Yeah. Yeah, that too. And it just feels annoying. Stranger is saying if that's Unreal, they can add you can use a second UV for details. Yeah, but that's already what's sort of happening, right? Because she's using the first UV for trim sheet detail, right? Like the wood grain. And then the second UV, well, yeah, the second UV is going to be unique on wrap because it needs to be unique to store the RGB details, right? So that's already happening. So that is already happening. It's just whether it's worth... Yeah, it's worth having that as like a system in the current configuration. The thing that I was going to say is you could potentially be smart with your modules. And let's say you have a 2-section piece, right? And then you have like a, I don't know, let's say this is 8. And then you have like a 4-section piece. They all have their unique like RGB mask. Or okay. I mean, this is something that you'll have to figure out, right? But I'm just stumbling into some ideas. Let's say you create like the... Let's say you create the RGB mask. Mask for your biggest element, right? So let's say your 8-piece module. You have your unique detail, blah, blah, blah. Then you can technically map your other elements onto your module that has 8, right? And then you could even, that's probably going to be too annoying with something like this, but you could then say like, okay, this 4-meter piece is just going to sample like these guys, let's say, right? So that would be the 4-meter piece. And then the 2-section piece, that's what I'm calling it, could then sample these guys. Usually it's a good idea to make a second version for a trim sheet, aka damaged version. Yeah, but the weird thing is that that's the first issue, right? We talked about that already, where it is not a trim sheet in like the very in the very traditional way of a trim sheet. I think this is the way that I understand it, at least. The way that she's currently using a trim sheet is literally this. This has like wood grain that goes like this. This had a wood grain that looks like this. And this had a wood grain that is like circles. That's it. There's no additional normal information. There's nothing in there. Nothing additional, right? It is just literally, at least the way that as I understand it currently, is that this is literally 3 tileable textures just made into like 3 separate trims, right? I don't know how many, but that's what it sounds like. But this could be, to come back to this for a second, you could do something smart here where you can combine a lot of the information and still sample different areas of that information from the same RGB mask while still making it unique per module. Let's see, vertex paint those two together. She should make those differences more noticeable and randomize how she utilizes it. Yeah, that's also a thing, right? We don't know the extent of the way she's using it too. But yeah. Let's see, vertex paint those two together. Oh yeah, you're talking about like the damage and the undamaged version? Yeah, 100%. Um, why not only one version with undamaged and damaged? Oh, this is all talking about like, yeah, the way that I'm splitting up the conversation is like you have like the trim sheet, right? Where I would definitely go for like just like a traditional trim sheet so that you have like that normal information and you're not relying on geometry, right? That's the main issue to me there. Because once we have a normal trim sheet, it is super simple to then make like a damaged version of the same trim sheet, right? Because you're just going into Painter and you're just painting a bunch of damage and then you're done, right? Because your modules or whatever you're going to use in your scene is still going to use the same UV layouts, so you can just replace it and swap it out, right? That's the easy stuff to me. But yeah, there's some fundamental things that I was trying to get at here, and I think relying too much on geometry instead of like a trim sheet is probably not going to work, right? So try to do the opposite. The second thing is how you're applying RGB masks and how your modules are structured and all those different things coming together, right? Basically, how do you then have a trim sheet and also add unique information on top of it, right? People in the chat have some good suggestions. I also recommend the same thing. Have vertex paint, right? That gives you like additional control over anything that you do. You can even combine that with like RGB masking to give you like additional control. So that's definitely going to work. And then just being clever with like your RGB masking without, I think the important thing there that I wanted to stress is that this is more like a personal thing, I guess, but I don't like the idea of having like, let's say 10 RGB, 10, I don't know the number, like say 10 to 20 like RGB masks for an environment at this scale. That just adds a lot of friction to the workflow for not a lot of visual gain, right? I think then it becomes, you have to be sort of smart with the way that you set it up so that you can reuse more of the same information, or you lean more heavily into, let's say, decals or vertex paint or the combination of both, right? And I think those can still be like really profitable. Because again, like, especially for people in general that are like newer to the creation in Unreal Engine, I don't want RGB masks to become a thing that a lot of people rely on. Because I think out of all the options that you can get to create a variation on top of, let's say, a trim sheet, it is probably the most annoying one, in my opinion, just in workflow sense, right? Because vertex painting, you just click on a button in Unreal, you're vertex painting, you're all good. Decal, you just drag it in, slap it on there, you're good. If you want to create like an RGB mask, you need to go back to Painter, you need to all set it up, and blah, 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 blah. You can do a lot with just 3 masks that can tile and can be manipulated for every asset in the scene, to be honest. Yeah, that's also true. Yeah. You can do a lot with very generic information, right? Especially if you have like a stack. And I talk about like a stack of options where I'm talking about, you know, combine that with like just a bunch of generic masks with vertex painting, with adding decals on top of it. That is a powerful system, right? Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I think it is, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I know that RGB masks are like used very regularly in the industry, but I still think it is better to rely on vertex painting and all those other tools before doing that, in my opinion. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful, Mana. Thank you so much for sharing your work. And best of luck. All right. Thank you all for the beautiful suggestions during the entire evening. I really appreciate like all the additional feedback. That is going to be really helpful for people that are rewatching the stream, right? Because they can't be here. So thank you all so much. I am going to be hopping out now because, as you can hear, my voice is kind of starting to go. So I'm going to chill out a little bit, and we will see each other on Friday. So thank you all for the suggestions, and yeah, have a good evening.